Three, two, one. Hey, I'm Dr. Luke, and you are watching our video on the Golden Bough, Chapter 18, Section 3, which is entitled, let me make sure I've got the title right here, The Soul as a Shadow and a Reflection. And today, it's just a duo, which is fitting because we're going to be talking about the pairs of opposites and the Gemini program a little bit later. No Ostick, no Heidi, just producer Jordan. Welcome.
Hello.
So I've got this like Sergeant Pepper's collage here. Um, before I get into sort of setting up what we're going to talk about in the video today, do you want to say anything?
No, let's get into it. I'm excited about this little chapter and all of your bonus material.
Yeah, well, it's quite extensive. I mean, there's so much
Mhm.
stuff that I haven't been able to talk about because these broadcasts keep getting backlogged. It's like it's uh it's a lot of information. So let's just kind of go around these images to orient people who may be interested in being long haulers with us. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about section 3 of chapter 18, the soul's a shadow and a reflection. And all this shadow talk um, it got me thinking about Carl Jung's concept of the shadow. And I wanted to spend some time developing our understanding of that archetype because it's going to be relevant to all this all this discussion concerning the moon. We've talked about the moon as being a symbol of the Great Mother archetype or possibly the anima. And from what I can tell from the maps of the psyche that I was able to pull together for this presentation, is that understanding the shadow archetype will perhaps enhance our understanding of the type of feminine consciousness the moon may have. I'm still hedging my bets on the Great Mother archetype, and I think there's good reason to think that. And then because we're looking at Carl Jung's shadow archetype, it's probably fitting for us to look at the way that Kubrick uses the shadow, the Jungian shadow in his films, and how that fits into this giant puzzle. I've been talking about this for weeks. This is something that's left over from last week, but I've gotten another layer on this whole Jack and the Beanstalk narrative that seems to be emergent in the Apollo missions, especially Apollo 14, with the orbiting of the moon trees. There's this pretty deep alchemical connection to moon trees as like a preceding step in the creation of the Philosopher's Stone that we're going to talk a little bit about today. I mentioned last week we were going to discuss Jung on numbers, especially the number 13 as it applies to Apollo 13. And one of the things I found, just like the past 24 hours, we've talked extensively about these trickster archetypes that are associated with the Apollo missions. I found another rabbit in Apollo 16, something I talked a little bit about last week, and I had a chance to explore deeper for our talk today. Um, we talked a little bit about the synchronicity between the Apollonian and the Dionysian, specifically in regards to the moon landings and also the occurrence of Woodstock a few weeks later on the timeline. And I think I said it in that broadcast. I was like, there's, and I've thought about this for years. This is something that I've contended was a real issue for probably 6 or 7 years, that there is some sort of meaningful connection between these two events. And little did I know, Ayn Rand gave a talk in 1969 after both events where she talked about the Apollonian and Dionysian choice. And it's actually an incredible talk. I was able to listen to it. But what I'm thinking is going on with it, it differs slightly, or actually considerably, from what Ayn Rand thinks is going on. So we'll talk a little bit about what she has to say. And hopefully we'll get to discuss this Edgar Allan Poe connection to Apollo 14 that emerged from our conversation about the moon trees. There seems to be some sort of Poe fractal associated with Apollo 14. So those are the big things I want to talk about. But of course, there are many other um, issues to chat about along the way. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, stick with us.
All right. Are
Yeah,
you ready to get into it?
I am.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so in slide 327, something I like to do when we get into these things before getting into the Fraser material is I like to tee things up with some quotes that are relevant from conversations that we had during last broadcast. Um, you can see here that I have a paper that I found in a scholarly journal called Revisiting Carl Jung's Archetype Theory, a Psychobiological Approach. And what's so interesting about this, I'll have Jordan read the quotes, if you don't mind, Jordan. But towards the end of Jung's life, he seemed to be debuting, working through, processing the idea that archetypal theory was somehow connected to DNA. And I was like, wow, that's a pretty big deal, especially since last week we were looking at the relationship between Wolfgang Pauli and Carl Jung and how that there are like archetypal factors in quantum physics. And it would seem to me that if Jung was thinking that there was some genetic connection to archetypes, we could start to see how the physical world, the biological world, and the psychological world all sort of work together in some sort of nested system. And I don't think he had time to really develop it in any sort of robust way, but we get a few hints here, and it's kind of peppered throughout his work. And I don't know, Jordan, would you mind reading these first two quotes?
Yeah, this is so cool. I had no idea he ever said anything
Yeah.
remotely close to this. I went off a little bit on a tangent in a previous episode, whatever we want to call it, talking about how the DNA has to be sort of a match for the spirit or even the energy. It makes sense you could lay on top of that archetype,
Hmm.
whatever's running through you. But I'd also like to remind people your genetic expression, you do have influence over. So when I encounter this idea that Jung stated that, I don't see it as some like horrible destiny that you're locked into, if that makes sense. But
Well, that's an
certain,
that's an interesting question about how Jung believed destiny to work. But these are larger metapsychological, metaphysical questions. And we could spend a lot of time just on that alone. But yeah, why don't you go ahead and read those quotes for us?
okay, okay.
I'm not trying to stop you. I aim for clarity on this.
Hmm. All right. Every man, quote, carries Eve, his wife, hidden in his body. It is this feminine element in every man based on the minority of female genes in his biological makeup, which I have called the anima.
Yep.
And then, if we examine their content, we find countless archaic and, quote, historical associations. They, the anima and animus, evidently live and function, especially in that phylogenetic substratum, which I have called the collective unconscious. They bring into our ephemeral consciousness an unknown psychic life beyond belonging to a remote past. It is the mind of our unknown ancestor.
Yeah, pretty cool, huh? So, I mean, I don't really have a lot to offer. I didn't even have a chance to get this article. It's paywalled, so I couldn't really go too deep into it. I mean, there's so much to cover for today. So I don't know, perhaps when you're talking about the anima and the animus, this is an idea that's easier for us to grasp if we're talking about like the ratio of genes or whatever. I'm curious when we talk about other archetypes, like if you could start to have some sort of like gene or DNA mapping for, I don't know, like the trickster or
Mm.
the hero or something like that. You're inclined to have this because you have this DNA sequence. I don't know if it would work like that. I don't know if perhaps the anima and the animus um, may be better candidates to do this type of research versus other archetypes. I don't know, but it's interesting that he even waded into these waters. He just dipped his toe in a little bit.
Yeah, I think everything you said could follow. When he talks about numbers, he has pretty strong ideas about some numbers, but then says,
Yeah.
but all the numbers, that's a lot of work. I could see a similar thing playing out here, the feminine, masculine, the anima, animus being a more clear dichotomy, to kind of explore. What he says here too, I mean, there's lots of fancy words in here, substratum.
Hmm.
Um, these fancy words for how to talk about the collective unconscious is quite fun. This idea of talking about the ancestral kind of imprint or impact on the like current iteration, the current you is super interesting. And that's something that comes up in my healing work is dissociating or resolving or basically like, yeah, those are probably the best ways of putting it. Resolving and closing out those ancestral archetypes that are subconsciously running you that don't necessarily need to be anymore. So it's interesting to see him talk about that here.
Yeah, for sure. It was surprising to me. Okay. Are you ready to progress to the next slide? Okay. And I mean, look, we could do a podcast about every single one of these things. I already have like 35 slides for today, so we just gotta keep going. I did have a chance between last session and today. I had a chance to listen to Edinger's Anatomy of the Psyche, which is on Audible if anybody is interested in that. And there's so much about alchemy that I am still figuring out. I am like a small child trying to understand Tolstoy when it comes to alchemical picture language and its connection to psychology. But this particular quote jumped out at me because I've long maintained, we talk about a lot of taboo subjects on this channel, and I don't want to talk about them in the way that most people talk about taboo subjects, where it's like, conspiratorial groups of men smoking cigars and things like that. I really do, I'm not naive enough to think that that stuff doesn't happen, but I ultimately think it's like part of this unfolding destiny of humanity, and ultimately, the Unus Mundus or God or whatever we're going to call it is in control of these things, and they seem to be a layer of the way that the reality is constructed. And this particular quote, Jordan, if you wouldn't mind reading this from page 83 of Anatomy of the Psyche, I think it perhaps offers us a different lens to view these things.
This idea corresponds to the alchemical circulatio, in which the material is to be repeatedly sublimated and coagulated, circling again and again through all the states of being until the philosopher's stone is created. The whole history of the world is thus seen as a vast alchemical process.
All right. So the reason why I enjoyed that so much is I think it reflects at this Jung is interested in alchemy, right? Because in some ways it's an attempt to understand how we go about achieving psychic wholeness for the individual. But the individual is in some ways an instance or a microcosm of the macrocosm, right? So that what's going on within the individual is in a way perhaps reflecting the entire scheme of history. And that's a really fascinating idea for me. So whatever those, we talk about the Negredo, the Albedo, the Cintronidas, the Rubedo, all these things that involve psychological alchemy, that they may very well be at work in the mechanics of the world itself, right? And what's appealing about this idea is, we look at these recycled archetypes, these tropes, these numbers, et cetera, and it seems like all the different historical events are connected together. But what could be the case is that these are just kind of like the building blocks that continue to be cycled around and around. And so if we're unlocking the Apollo missions, like, we're going to be
Mm.
able to unlock other historical events as well, because the same cycles, the same archetypes are in play. So whatever we're discovering here, and I've contended that there is some sort of cosmic conception that's going on in the Apollo missions, the conjunctio, the hierogamous, or whatever it's called, right? That this is probably something that you can find in the other major world events, whatever it is. Like,
Mm.
you might be able to see this. I hate to say this. I don't know. I've not looked into it, but you might be able to see this in whatever has gone on. And I think about the major world events that have gone on in the past 30 years. Okay. It's probably something very similar is happening as well there.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we see fingerprints of it all the time, but I agree. We are children in our understanding, I think, of alchemy.
Well, I think I've got some, I think latching on to this whole moon tree thing has helped me understand, like, we look at these alchemical um, manuscripts every once in a while. And, you know, I believe it was like 2 broadcasts ago. It's like, oh, so that's kind of like what the tree of life means. And that's what the
Mm,
Ouroboros kind of means. And what does it mean when they're together? Like the self-fertilizing serpent and the tree that grows to heaven. Like that's something I wouldn't really have been able to tell you very much about like 2 months ago. Now I can look at
mhm.
that and like I could explain it a little bit better. And I think these moon trees are going to pop a little bit for us today too.
Yeah, also, there's like layers of deepening when it comes to understanding these things and comprehending them. I think in the past I would have said, "Oh yeah, I understand what the Ouroboros is." And yet today I have a very different perspective. It's not that the other perspective was completely wrong, but
Yeah,
it was more of a service.
yeah, yeah. There are definitely layers to it. All right. So I think the next slide is actually us getting into the Fraser material that we're prepared to discuss today. Um, Let me get to my slide here. What did you think about the Fraser material before we start launching into it?
I thought it was super fascinating. I had some offshoots of thoughts that are not necessarily explored directly in the text, but I'm always thinking, where do I see this today? How does this apply today? So we could totally get into that.
For sure. Well, you just stopped me. I mean, so this first slide really is just looking at how savages, as Fraser calls them, right, often view their shadow or reflection as their soul or a vital part of themselves, making a source of spiritual danger. If the shadow is trampled, struck, or stabbed, the person feels the injury as if inflicted on their own body. And there are a bunch of different examples of this, right? Like he has the example of, and I've got him here on the page, but like in Vatar, magicians sicken people by stabbing or hacking their shadows with weapons. Um, he talked about the Bank Islands. They have these things called these elongated stones called eating ghosts, and which house dangerous spirits that can extract a person's soul through their shadow, causing death. So these stones are used to guard houses. And there's a ton of other examples, but I mean, I guess this would be kind of an alien concept, but I've been thinking a little bit about it more deeply. Were there ones that jumped out at you that you thought were particularly, I don't know, provocative or stimulating in any way?
Not in particular in this instance. I was thinking more just collectively about the shadow, that image you had on the opening
Yeah,
collage with the persona and the conscious whatever, and the shadow, and just thinking about how that's applicable here. A modern example I was thinking of, well, people take selfies or photos of themselves all the time, taking a likeness of themselves and then putting it on social media.
yeah,
And in our minds, we are associating with that. And when we get positive or negative, even attention on that image, it's like, oh, somebody's liking me. I think psychologically is happening a lot of the time. Like we're putting likeness of ourselves out there, and people's reactions to it are not a reaction to a reflection, not a reaction to something that is outside of ourselves. It is like a piece of your soul almost, the way that people kind of feel validated or invalidated by the response.
yeah. We talked a little bit about this last week with the emergence of the NPC phenomenon. We talked about how like a sizable portion of the population does not have internal monologue, cannot do like these imaginative rotating exercises, et cetera, et cetera. And not necessarily in this section, though we're going to get to it, in all the different ways that these air quotes primitive societies viewed the duplication of the soul. We have all these different stories about how like missionaries and explorers and things like that would interact with these primitive peoples, and
Mhm.
they would be like, oh, he's stealing your shade when he's taking your picture or whatever. And I think it raises a very interesting question. Maybe it doesn't work the way that these people thought it happened, but perhaps, with all this documentation of ourselves and putting these images of ourselves out there, like there is something that is like we're having our souls robbed in that process. Perhaps there's a real danger for having our images consumed so easily. I'm not saying like the cameras are stealing our souls, but perhaps there is a complex psychological phenomenon there that is causing some sort of diminution of spirit.
Yeah, I mean, I really was spiraling about this honestly today. And as you know, I'm super deep in my common law and administrative law
Yeah.
studies. And so it was difficult for me not to latch on and try to shoehorn what I'm obsessing about there here. And the persona is, you're acting as, or like you could even think of a shadow being appended to you as a human in the corporate matrix, right? Like you have this digital twin, you have this
Yeah.
corporate twin on paper that isn't alive, it's not you. And yet, things that are done to it can affect the living, breathing man, woman that you are if you allow it to. And that's kind of where my head was at with all of this, Luke. In a way, I think when you mess with, quote, the shadow in some of these more contemporary contexts, you can impact the man or woman. However, it really hinges on the belief and same, or rather the identification. If you identify with the reflection, if you identify with the image of you taking part of you, I think on a level it is so because your belief is creating that.
Yeah. It's a pretty deep thing to get into. I remember I perhaps the novelty has worn off on us because we've had social media for so long, but I remember when I had like MySpace, like in the mid 2000s. And I remember because I was like doing music at the time and I would like always like refresh to see if I got like more listens. And, I started to get, being an OCD person, I started to get like really obsessive about my profile and I remember having like an existential crisis where I thought like I had completely duplicated myself with social media. And it really freaked me out. But then I kind of got past it. But it felt like there was like this other version of me, and that doesn't really sound that profound in 2025. But at the time, it scared me a little bit, and I'm not really sure. It made me feel very uneasy. And I like these savages who are afraid of cameras? Did they feel the same way? I just didn't say, "Oh, look, it's stealing my soul. It's stealing my shade." But
Yeah.
the response was still the same.
Yeah. No, I think it's really fascinating. This could be an hour in and of
Yeah,
itself,
it sure
but
could. Yeah.
I think it to me it comes down to the identification with, are you identifying with that thing or not identifying with that thing? And I think we're no maybe unconsciously over identifying with replications of us or like photocopies of us that aren't real at all.
Mm.
But what happens to those photocopies freaks us out.
Right. I mean, we've got the story of Narcissus, right? Who's like, we're going to look at reflections and whatnot and where this may have come from. But, in everybody, we throw this label of Narcissus around, especially in the age of social media. But, Narcissus dies from gazing at his reflection. And I wonder if that mythological tale is like one of these like alchemical processes that is continuing to work in our society. Like, are we are we killing ourselves in some way by continuing to gaze upon these replications of ourselves?
That's super interesting. Like it almost lures you out of being embodied here,
Yeah.
which is where all the power is.
Well, a lot of these primitive stories, these primitive cultures that believe that your reflection was your soul, they were, if you got too into staring into a puddle or a creek or something like that, looking at yourself and admiring your beauty, et cetera, like it was a real possibility that like a wild animal would come and eat you, right? So, you like that a crocodile or something like that would drag you and you'd be his dinner. So, what is the thing that's reaching through our phones? Right? Like, what is a smartphone? This whole like, what is the abyss that we're staring into? A lot of people joke that it's like fallen angel technology or something like that. Like, what if there's more truth to that than we understand?
Oh, man. I mean, it's a scrying device, number 1.
Yeah.
It is the inorganic kingdom animated. I don't even know if the word artificially is correct or not. It's crazy stuff.
It is crazy. All right. I've gone schizo. It's early in the
Oh,
show.
we've gone down this one before. I
Yeah.
I always think of the Carlos Castaneda stuff and the minerals and how he says they're jealous of humans, and I always remember, "Oh, well, that's what's in this little device I'm staring at."
Yeah. Well, let's progress a little bit more here. We've kind of jumped around to a few of the sections here. Um, but there's also the case, though, if you go to slide 330, where Frazer talks about how the shadow represents a vital part of a person or animal, and contact with it can be as dangerous as physical touch, leading savages to avoid shadows of those deemed hazardous, such as mourners, women, and especially mothers in law. So it's not just like the soul is a vital part of you that can be affected through stabbing or something like that, but somebody else who's like considered to be evil and powerful, their shadow can affect you. In a particular example, he has the Shuswap Indians believe a mourner's shadow causes sickness, while Kernai novices in Victoria are warned against women's shadows, which can make them thin, lazy, and stupid. I mean, this is I'm not this is this is not real, but I'm just saying this is some of the beliefs that are reflected here. It's kind of humorous that people would think that a woman's shadow would make you stupid, but you know things come full circle. We've like we're talking about here these silly things about looking at your reflection in the water and how different is it from looking at our reflection in the smartphones. So I don't know. Do we have this modern analog where we view like the shadow of someone else like it's potentially making us become ill or die? I don't know what I don't know. I hadn't really thought about a modern example of that.
Mhm, mhm,
Had
mhm.
you? Do you know one off the top of your head? I hadn't gotten
Well,
into it.
it's controversial, but the whole germ theory to rain theory, and perhaps it's a hybrid, but that whole debate
Ooh, that's interesting. Well,
is very relevant here.
draw it out. I think I know where you're going, but draw it out for me a little bit.
Well, if we're to take, I think, a metaphysical or spiritual perspective, we are protected from material things that would do us harm that is not for our highest good. And yet, during 2020, how many churches closed?
Right.
How many places do we no longer touch each other, et cetera, because of this belief that even being within 6 feet of a person, even if they don't have any symptoms, they aren't sharing saliva or anything with you.
Well,
I,
let me defend the modern science believers' response to what you're saying. So what they would say is, look, these silly primitives, they understood that coming into close proximity with a sick person um, would lead to sickness and death. They just didn't understand the mechanism. They thought it had something to do with the shadow when it really had to do with these things called viruses and bacteria. And that and be, and so they were like partially right. They just didn't understand the mechanism. And we, the modern science people, know everything or know everything by comparison and that's why we are advanced and they are not. what would you say to modern science person?
I don't talk to modern science person. I mind my own business. Um, I mean, that seems like a lot of hubris to assume that we see the whole picture. What comes to me in my prayer time, in my meditation, is not what everyone else is saying, and that's okay. I don't need to persuade anybody. However, assuming that we know it all and pointing and laughing and saying, well, you got the mechanism wrong. You got the general idea right, but you got the mechanism wrong. There's books out there that have the hypothesis that it's more of a frequency exchange. What I've been shown is that it's also a consciousness exchange. Like there is contagion of consciousness and energy and frequency that isn't just. I've never seen a virus. I don't really want to get
Yeah, we don't have
into
to get
this. It
into all
doesn't
of it. Yeah.
matter to me. It doesn't matter to me, but it just reminded me of that. And under certain circumstances, I certainly saw people behaving like on the top of a mountain at the national park, outside in the
Mm,
sun,
yeah.
people still following these rituals because of these beliefs. I don't think is that different than this. That's an
Yeah.
extremes, to take it to the extreme.
Yeah.
I don't I don't
Yeah, I
need
hear
to
what you're
debate
saying. I
the
mean, look,
particulars.
the power of suggestion is very strong, and I mean, I think this was like a well-known idea for a long time. I mean, I remember during COVID, like reading Susan Sontag on I forget the name of the book she has on illness that was pretty good at you know encapsulating what the power of suggestion could do in these scenarios, and also Tom the Magic Mountain. Is that Thomas More? Who is that? I forget.
I don't
But the
know. I've
Magic
never
Mountain,
heard
I
that.
forget. I should have slept more last night. But that whole book is based around the power of suggestion.
Mm,
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to think about shadow stuff. I don't ever really think about my shadow. Not in this way, like this thing that
mhm.
I'm casting.
Peter
There's just
Pan, it shows up there. I don't know that we cover that here, but that just popped in. They have a whole thing with the shadows. I'd have to look at it. Yeah, it's not something I think of that much either in a literal sense.
I
We
mean, I
talk a
think
lot about the shadow, like the
yeah.
psychological shadow.
Yeah, when I think about the shadow, or when I think about shadows, I think about in terms of its amplification through the social media. During this
Mhm.
presentation, I started to think about it in regards to doppelgangers and doubles.
Mm.
Um, where else have I thought about it? I mean,
Plato's
I
cave, of course.
yeah, it's just my own shadow, like, or other people's shadows, not something that really preoccupies me very much. And it's
Yeah.
interesting, like, why is that? I don't know if that's just me. Like, I paid a little bit more of attention to it because I knew I had to do this presentation this week, and I've been thinking about it. The only time I ever really notice my shadow is like when it like creates a cool aesthetic. I used to like go running around here at like twilight or something like that, and every once in a while like I would catch my like shadow like split into two, and so there'd be like three of us, and I never thought there
Mhm.
was any sort of like emotional or psychological or metaphysical significance to it. It's just like, oh, this would be make for a cool picture. But I've never really sat there and thought about anybody's shadow.
Yeah, those were where we block the light. As the light I mean, I'm just getting really off in the deep end. As the light body continues I mean, I was thinking this morning how angels wouldn't have a shadow, right, if they're beings of light.
Mm.
And that was curious to me. Like, a flame doesn't have a shadow. Like pure source, pure God doesn't have a shadow. We have a shadow because we are material and on some level distort the light. We like refract it, we contain it, we like bend it. We're not completely pure vessels for God because that's just part of the work of being here. Um, I
Like when
don't know if
I've like yeah, like when I've thought about shadows, it's largely like in physics, especially like like re-understanding what reality is. Like especially with all this like stuff on the moon, right? Like, you look at the moon landing stuff, and the big thing that people point to is like, oh, well, the shadows like don't add up. And I didn't have a chance to review that
Mm,
material, but it seems like a worthy area of exploration. I think about, um, you know, the sh- like the different types of light that the moon casts, etc. Um, and just generally how like physical phenomenon work within the realm when you're sort of when
mhm.
you're trying to reinterpret it. But my own shadow, my own physical shadow, I don't really think about it too much.
It is one of those kind of tells in AI generated stuff, and like you said, the landing footage or anytime you're analyzing something. Kubrick was obviously obsessed
Yeah, yeah, for
with
sure,
lighting.
sure.
Um, yeah. I think the last time I really thought about it, we were backlit by that truck, and we had these, like, Slender Man,
Oh yeah, that's right. That
like,
did that
shadows.
yeah, that did happen kind of recently, didn't it?
Mhm.
Okay, let's go to the next batch here. What do we got here? So something something that was interesting here is where the shadow is seen as intrinsically linked to life, its loss causes weakness or death. So its shortening is viewed with anxiety as a sign of declining vital energy. So some examples of this were in equatorial Amboina and Uliasi, people avoid going outside at noon when shadows vanish, fearing it would steal the shadow of their soul. The Mangaians recount the warrior Tukaitawa, whose strength mirrored his shadow's length, peaking in the morning, ebbing at noon, and reviving in the afternoon until a hero killed him at midday. So, I mean, that's an interesting idea. It's not just and there's many other examples here, but uh, that's an interesting idea that one's strength and vitality is dependent on the length or the shortness of your shadow. Never would have occurred to me, but it follow if you view your shadow as like an integral part of yourself and it waxes and it wanes, it would kind of make sense that your sense of self would be dependent on that.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And there's a bunch of other stuff here, like there was stuff about people burying their shadow like in the foundation of buildings or whatever, and that this would have like certain negative outcomes if your shadow was somehow connected to being buried underneath a temple or something like that. And then people
Mhm.
who would capture your shadow and trade them, like it's all really, really wild.
Yeah. The shadow also it's our relationship to the sun primarily.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I don't know. Maybe that's not revolutionary. Just kind of a
it
restating of
well,
what
i
we've
think i think
said.
if we go back to the Edinger quote about all of history being this alchemical process, and we start to think, what is the sun, like we've talked about it being this egoic like solar consciousness and it being unified with the passive moon consciousness, feminine consciousness. um I think there's a lot to work out there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't have an answer, but that is an interesting thing to point out, the intimate connection with us, perhaps a solar deity.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, like, the warrior at noon, like, it's tied to time.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So let's see. Um, okay, we're going, if we go to 332, where we're going to talk about people equating a man's soul with this reflection in water or a mirror. Um, yeah, we've talked about this a little bit. I mean, some examples. The Andamenese, let me get this right. The Andamenese see reflection in mirrors as souls, while the Motu Motu in New Guinea initially believed mirror images were their souls. They had these. I guess they could be reasoned out of it. In New Caledonia, elders view water or mirror reflections as the soul. So it's just a pretty widespread belief, which this, I guess I'm kind of curious about it from a perspective of like development. Like when you I think it's kind of interesting. I get drawn into these like IQ discussions like on social media, and like when people actually are able to recognize themselves in the mirror and like how that is connected to like gaining consciousness and whatnot. I think that's I love looking at animals and like which animals can recognize themselves in the mirror, especially I follow a lot of monkey accounts. Especially these orangutans really they seem like people. They seem like these really quiet mystical people. I love them. And I watch just like orangutans like comb their hair in mirrors and stuff like that. I'm just like me. Just like me. So I
That's cute.
appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if we have anything new to say here, but yeah, I think it does. I mean, nothing new under the sun, right? We see through social media and the selfies, et cetera, et cetera. Like those images are extensions of ourselves. Like it's really important for me to like not look tired or sound tired on this because that's who I am. And if you have a negative evaluation of this video and how I look in it, et cetera, like
Mhm.
that's I'm going to internalize that, and that's actually going to like going to be a true fact.
Yeah. Or your ID being you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The id, the ID.
Yeah. Ooh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
I'm surely not the first one,
That
but
is interesting. That's an interesting synchronicity. So I don't know if you want to say anything more about these.
no, I feel complete. It was interesting, provoked some self-reflection.
Well, there's a
Get
couple
it?
more. I mean, yeah. Bump, bump. Um, there's a couple more here. Uh, going on this whole reflection thing. If we go to slide 333, there's the reflection can often be a death omen.
Mhm.
So like in ancient India and Greece, it was a maxim to avoid looking at one's reflection in water, as the Greeks saw dreaming of a reflection as a death omen. You know, this could be traceable back to the whole story of Narcissus. Um, there's this widespread custom of covering mirrors or turning them to the wall after a death in the house stems from the fear that the deceased ghosts lingering until burial might carry off the living person's soul projected as a reflection. So that's like super interesting, right? Like so the spirit of the person who's just died like may somehow, if it catches your reflection in the mirror, like might be able to carry off your soul as well, since it's like a
Mm.
duplication of it, right? um and that's like why some cultures like turn these mirrors around like in the hospital and stuff like that. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it is. I've always not appreciated being able to see mirrors when sleeping. That's always freaked me out.
Mirrors are very strange, you know. It's like, oh well, look, you know, like you, the fact that there's like so much mirrors are involved in so much like occult stuff. And you know, we have like Alice in Wonderland like going through the looking glass and all this other stuff. Like it makes me really wonder if like mirrors are like this like banal, seemingly banal um thing that we've brought into our homes, but like really there's some connection to some spiritual world that we have inadvertently brought into our intimate spaces. Like we just go like, yeah, let's have mirrors everywhere. There, and that we just have allowed portals to be in our homes. I
I
know
think it's
that's a crazy
similar.
idea.
No, it's not. I think it's similar to the camera phones and like constantly capturing photos. Like, it changes your perception of yourself and your reality, which isn't necessarily bad, but it brings in a different angle of awareness into who you are, how you operate in the world, how other people see you. I mean, I for months did a daily meditation. It was part of a course, and it was like, you do this every day. So much so that I took camping with me, this big full length mirror, took it into took it camping in the woods and put it up against a tree so I didn't fail my class. And it was certainly a very fascinating experience to do specific meditations with a mirror every single day.
You know, it's funny. I wonder, like, did you ever do this? Like, I have friends who are early adopters of like these voice activated devices, like was it like the Amazon Echo? Is that, or is that Alexa? Like, and I don't know. This is like 5, 6, 7 years ago, and they would be like, Alexa, da 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 da, and I'd be like, that is so I can't believe you willingly brought this thing into your home. I'm like, oh, relax, Luke. It's just some technology, et cetera, et cetera. And today, like, I'm like talking to AI all the time, although I'm very mad at Grok lately, um, for reasons discussed on previous podcasts. But I wonder if, like, when people brought, I don't, maybe I was the only person who had a problem with these voice activated devices in their homes. But I wonder, like, when people start bringing mirrors into their home, like, people were like, "What are you doing? You sure you want to bring that in?" Of course, like, everybody's like, "Oh, okay." Like, my thinking at the time was like, why are we, like, whatever convenience an Alexa could bring into your home, like, ultimately, like, all this stuff is being banked and put in data centers, and that is accessible via all sorts of intelligence agencies. Like, why would why would you dox yourself like this? I don't know. I wonder if, like, people felt that way about mirrors.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a curious question. I mean, I'm with you. Like, hell to the no on adding additional spyware. I'm already consenting to so much just having a phone. Maybe one day I won't do that. But yeah, perhaps. I mean, who ultimately owns, though, the mirror portal technology, if that is what it is?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, in that way, it feels less nefarious because it does feel a little bit more still tied to nature in a way. Whereas the panopticon surveillance state does not feel like it's of nature. But who am I to say?
Yeah.
I guess I am to
Well,
say. That's
I
what I'm
imagine
saying.
the surveillance state and whatever supernatural forces are deeply intertwined. I think they got mixed together at some point.
For sure, but I see it more as this overlap or overlay, excuse me, and hijacking of the natural world. It's a perversion of it. It's an
Yeah.
attempt to exploit it, which is different than its natural state.
Yeah. All right. Let me see what else we got here.
Okay.
Um, let's see, in slide 334. So, just as with shadows and reflections, portraits are often believed to contain the soul or a vital essence of the portrayed person, making people reluctant to have their likenesses taken, as possession of the image could allow fatal influence over the original. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this with the cultures that weren't lining up to get their photos taken. The Eskimo of Bering Strait fear witches stealing a person's shade via photographs, causing them to waste away and die. On the lower Yukon River, a village headman panicked villagers by claiming a photographer's camera box held all their shades, sending them fleeing into their houses. It even gets in this thing of, like, having your image on money. I think there were like rulers were like, you like, do I really want my face on currency and have this, like, passed all around, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this gets into the whole sympathetic magic issue too, and the contagious magic that we talked about very early on.
Yeah, that was super interesting to me. Like, leaders in these cultures were like, no, 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 do not put my face and my likeness on things. And then comparing and contrasting that with today, it's so normal. We put
Yeah.
presidents and Harriet Tubman and like all these people, the queen, on all of our money. What is that? I mean, currency in and of itself is so magical and so fascinating and laden with symbols. But it's cool. I had never heard anyone be like, like,
Yeah.
don't don't use my likeness for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Jordan, I don't know if you'd mind progressing to the next slide, just to,
Sure.
in case anybody wanted to I don't think we need to go through all these different examples of cultures and recoiling from cameras and things like that. And like the last example, this is still existing in modern in Europe to some extent here with Scotland. But yeah, I think that effectively covers the Frazer section of today. Do you want to say anything else about that? I mean, the next thing that I want to talk about is we go to slide 336 and talk about the Jungian shadow a little bit, because in some ways it seems like it seems like we look at all these different places where Frazer could have influenced Jung, and Freud and others, and I think it's like super fascinating. I thought about even making a slide. I'm re-listening to A Modern Man in Search of His Soul because I finished
Mm.
that Edinger last night, and I was like, oh, I got to have something else. And where did these ideas like the dark side, the shadow, the collective unconscious, where did this really come? There is a storied like intellectual tradition of all of this, and I wonder how much of the shadow or the id or whatever else like we're talking about like was actually inspired by reading for what Frazer had to say about the soul or the shade being interpreted as such. So, um, but it may not be connected at all. Jung does talk a little bit about the intellectual history of the collective unconscious in that book, but yeah, that's a whole fascinating rabbit trail to go down. And so, there's a lot of things that could be said about the Jungian shadow, but I think most succinctly, Jung puts it: the thing a person has no wish to be. And what I thought was so interesting when I cobble together these, people on the internet really get into mapping the psyche as it's understood by Jung. And I find it to be super fascinating and very helpful. I'm a very visual person, as you can tell from all these different slides where I
Mhm.
make all these different collages. And they get really detailed. I'm not exactly sure, like, if there's like some hierarchy of psyche maps, like if someone has like oh, this is the one, or this reflects Jung later in life or in midlife or earlier in his career. But something I noticed that I think is going to be super relevant to our conversation about what the moon symbolizes is when I look at the shadow on these different maps of the psyche, and I think from what I've read of Jung on the shadow is like quite large. It and sometimes it seems like it's like almost taking up the entire collective unconscious. And if that's the case, like it's like, well, what archetypes like are embedded in the shadow? But then other depictions, like this one here where the multicolored one that we have, it doesn't seem
Mhm.
that large. Whereas it seems very small um, on this to the one to the right of it, but the one above seems like rather large. But at least on two out of these three, you can see that the way that the individuals who put these together, and I don't know who to credit for these, I think they just kind of float out there like memes do, is that it seems like the shadow subsumes or houses the anima and the animus. At least two out of these three are saying that. And then with this multicolored one, you can see that the shadow is not incorporating the way it's depicted. I don't know if this is correct or not. Is not containing these other archetypes. And the one that I'm primarily concerned with here is the Great Mother. So
Mm.
as we try to understand the feminine nature of the consciousness of the moon, I think we really have to take this into consideration. And the way you see the circle, at least on this multicolored one, I, that green circle is about the personal unconscious, whereas the way that they have the archetypes portrayed here is that they are part of that inherited substratum of the collective unconscious rather than the personal unconscious. And I think
Mm.
that's going to be super important, that the moon might not be a symbol of one's anima, because that would be too connected to the personal. It's going to be connected to something deeper in that phylogenetic layer that is the collective unconscious. I think that's something insightful that can be said at this point.
Interesting.
I think. But I mean, this multicolored one could be all wrong. So you got to like, as we've learned through this process, I made some quote errors with Grok. You do not take any of these as gospel. Go and verify it. And there's a lot of work I still have to do on this.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of effort that's gone into these diagrams, I'm sure. And we're trying to encapsulate very it it feels more blurry potentially to me than sometimes diagrams make it look. And same with the Larkin charts when we went
Yeah,
through the Gospel of Luke.
yeah,
They're very helpful, but at the same time, at a certain point, they can also be an obstacle to deeper comprehension because the brain sees the chart and then it puts things into boxes in cleaner ways than reality actually functions. I'm
right.
kind of spiraling from what I remember. I think what I know the deepest is probably the psychological types and shadow functions and how they're kind of like the counterweights to this is not the right word, but the primary functions, the functions that are a strength, like they're always the opposite pair of what is natural for one to do. So this quote of it's like the thing a person has no wish to be, it's like the opposite of what you naturally express. But then I'm curious what really is the distinction between the shadow and the unconscious? Is the shadow sort of synonymous with it? I don't know. I need to do more homework.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like how much of the collective unconscious is the shadow eating up, and these maps are kind of all over the place.
Well, in the personal unconscious too, I guess all this to say, I don't quite understand how this functions because my brain wants to conflate shadow with unconscious. And when I speak about the shadow more generally, I'm conflating those terms, but
Well,
clearly,
I think it makes sense to talk about it in terms of the personal unconscious because this is not going to be shared in the same way from individual to individual. Like everyone's shadow side is going to be, I think, different. I mean, it's like,
yes, it's going to
you
be
know,
the opposite of
of,
their, but also can you, through the individuation process, are you not taking things from the shadow and then integrating them into a different part of this chart? So I almost wonder too is as someone progresses and expands and evolves, like this chart would seemingly
mm.
shift.
I think it's interesting just how much one's anima or animus, depending on your gender, is fueling what the shadow is. That's something I'm still trying to work through. Something I wanted to say here is, we talked a little bit. I've already mentioned it about the synchronicity between the Apollinian and Dionysian events of the moon landings in Woodstock. Is that Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy, where that idea comes from, the tension between those two metaphysical
Mhm.
impulses, is actually, from what I understand, is a source of inspiration for how Jung constructed the map of the psyche, and this Dionysian aspect um, might be connected to. It's not the only source of inspiration. I mean, clearly, there's the work that he did with Freud and
Mm,
expanding the hidden motives of man beyond whatever sexuality that Freud attributed to them, but that Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy was important for Jung to put this together. I think we think about the effect of Nietzsche on Jung primarily in the Zarathustra seminars, but
mhm.
really just this map right here has something to do with the Dionysian element. This hidden part of ourselves, this unconscious part of ourselves that we don't really know is there.
Yeah.
But I'll elaborate on that a little bit more. We've got that coming up.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna get to
Yeah.
the bottom of all of
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
today.
I mean, yeah, yeah. Oh, and something else I wanted to point out with this is if I think it's widely believed that
Mm,
these archetypes have shadow sides as well. So how that this I think this contributes to the confusion about how expansive the shadow is if archetypes have, we talk about like let's say there's a ruler archetype, right? the fact that the other side of that coin is like, I guess, the dictator, and how much this is like true Jungian stuff, or like this is like a misunderstanding that's passed around in memes online. I have a lot of work still to do. But this is where I got this infographic from, the structurallearning.com. Uh, that would seem to connect all the archetypes to the shadow in some way. And so
Mhm.
that would seem, it would expand the dominion of it. So how it all works together, I'm still figuring it out.
This is fascinating. I mean, we fixate on the positive archetypes, I think mostly, but it stands to reason that the shadow archetypes are just as pervasive and maybe even juicier. And when you think about compelling stories, like of course you always have a villain, you have monsters, you have these shadow aspects, and a lot of the story arcs, even through the hero with a thousand, as you go through that hero's journey, often it is moving from the shadow function into the conscious form of the same
Yeah.
archetype.
Yeah.
Very
Okay.
fun.
Yeah. Super fun. All right. What do we got next here? We're doing Kubrick in the shadow.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So this is just a smattering of the shadow in Kubrick. Some of this might be compelling. Some of this might be what you would call incidental. But we know that Kubrick was deeply preoccupied with the Jungian shadow. I mean, primarily, Michael Harris talked about this in a couple different examples, but in his Kubrick book, he says, he called me a couple of nights later to ask me if I'd read any Jung. I had. Was I familiar with the concept of the shadow, our hidden dark side? I assured him that I was. We did half an hour on the shadow and how he really wanted to get it into his war picture. So Michael Harry, co-wrote Full Metal Jacket. So if you're not familiar with who that is, and I don't think it was the first time that Kubrick worked the shadow into his work. I mean, Full Metal Jacket came out in 1987, and it seems like it's already there in The Shining and in Clockwork Orange and arguably in 2001: Space Odyssey. But the most obvious example of it being in Full Metal Jacket is the whole duality of man episode, where Joker is talking about how he has Born to Kill on his helmet and the peace pin, and he says something about the duality of man. It's a pretty profound scene. But we also see like there being a light and dark element working with Sergeant Hartman's speech to the Marines about how the Marines and God like work together in some strange way, right? But uh, you know, a lot of people talk about how the shadow that is projected on the wall behind Wendy is like in The Shining is potentially a connection to Nosferatu. But also, if we do an esoteric Jungian interpretation of The Shining, we've talked about Wendy being like the great mother and that this could be her dark side. But probably the best example of it pre Full Metal Jacket is in Clockwork Orange. Like this example right here, like we see little Alex. He's in prison. He's trying to get out on for good behavior and this experimental program, the Ludovico technique, and he's just like getting super acquainted with the Bible and becoming this really good citizen while he's in prison. But all the while he's reading the Bible, is he's having these fantasies about whipping and crucifying Jesus. And so there's this dichotomy, there's this duality, there's this what he's presenting to the the people that run his institution and what he's really fantasizing about. And then maybe this is something or not. We have Frank in 2001 shadow boxing very early in the movie. And I've not gone into this, but I think that probably is a hint about some sort of alchemical process that's going on in 2001.
That's pretty cool. I was multitasking a little bit, and so Wendy with the shadow and Peter Pan, and I'm not sure what it is
Oh
in the
yeah.
original Peter
Yeah.
Pan, but
Yeah.
she finds his shadow and she like keeps it for Peter. So they
Interesting.
have this whole concept of like stealing and like having people's shadow, and The Wendy connection is very interesting.
Yeah. I had forgotten about that. Yeah. It's been so long since I've read or seen Peter Pan. I forgot
I know, me
those
too.
details are kind of lost on me,
Yeah.
but I think it's certainly there. I mean, how can you not think of Peter Pan when you think about Wendy?
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, I think Ossick was talking about that
Yeah, I think so.
uh, more extensively one time. I don't have it all worked out. So I mentioned, do you want to say anything else about this, or should we go to the next one?
Can keep it cruising.
Yeah, I like the pace. It's good. Okay. So I got really obsessed with this whole thing as like the double as the shadow. Um, do you want to read that quote?
Sure. The shadow personifies everything that the subject refuses to acknowledge about himself, whether consciously or unconsciously, and represents a tight passage, a narrow door whose painful constriction no one is spared who goes down to the deep well.
So
Hmm.
it was hard to find like this smoking gun where Young's like, oh, for sure. Like when you encounter the double, like that is the shadow. He talks a little bit about it in certain places, like if you're in dreams or you're seeing in a dream, you may see projections of yourself on other people or whatever. You- I don't think he did extensive essaying on the concept of the doppelganger. That was more Freud. And
Mm.
Freud talks about
Hmm.
it like this, how it contributes to this sense of uncanniness and the sense of doom. But if from what I think it's fair to infer what Jung has to say about these things, that encountering one's double at least perhaps causes us to confront the shadow side of ourselves. And I wanted to look at this phenomenon. I'm super obsessed with outer space, and one of the things that happens in like conspiracy communities, especially like the everything is fake people, is there's this tendency to be like, see, this person looks like this person, therefore they're all actors. Like this person's playing this person on the world stage, right? And one of the ones that people jump up and down a lot about, and I guess I can kind of see it, is that there is a really uncanny resemblance between Neil Armstrong and Yuri Gagarin. Neil Armstrong being our first man on the moon, and Yuri Gagarin being the first Russian in outer space, right? And Yuri dies, I think, in '68 when people don't really know who Neil is. Neil had been part of the Gemini program, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of his early Gemini stuff. But Neo comes on the scene after Yuri has passed and be like, see, this is just one person supplanting. This is one person playing two roles. And it's sort of compelling. And they're like, oh, and it almost seems like mockery. If you look over here on the left, like early in like 1970, Neil Armstrong went to the Soviet Union for this like diplomatic exchange to build relationships between the Soviet Union and America in outer space. And it's this, he's I believe the first woman cosmonaut. That's who this woman is. I forget her name. She's putting a pen or something like that on him in front of this photograph of Yuri Gagarin. And it's so psychedelic. It is so effing psychedelic. But I think what what I think is probably going on here is if we kind of interpret the reality to be this alchemical process, to be dreamlike in nature, that this isn't like actor based reality. This isn't the same person playing both roles. This is like the reality churning and conspiring in such a way that it's communicating something to us about these two individuals coming into contact with one another. And I don't know if it's trying to say that there's really no difference between the United States and the Soviet Union. They're two sides of the same coin, or there's like one's the light side and one's the dark side, or something like that. That feels closer to true to me. I mean, because I can look at these pictures of Neil Armstrong and Yuri Gagarin, and they look incredibly similar, but that's not the same person. Like you can just look at their teeth. Their teeth are different, but there's a lot that they really share in common. And this isn't the only individual that people think is like playing multiple roles on the world stage. I mean, one of them uh, is George C. Scott, who who's in Strangelove, and Buzz Aldrin. Like they're the exact same age. They look nearly identical. They both, I think, fought in Korea. Like there's a lot of parallelism in their lives. Like if they were going to make a if they were going to make a Buzz Aldrin movie, they would have had George C. Scott play him. So I don't know. I think there's something about the confrontation of the shadow going on here rather than actor-based reality. So I'll pause there for a second. What do you think is happening here?
I mean,
Do you think this is the same guy?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we eternally have this question slash conversation of like how this stuff occurs. The likeness is super hilarious and fascinating and trippy.
Yeah.
And I love in this picture the portrait of him. He's like looking down like
Yes.
at them. It's
Yes.
so good.
It's
Is
so
this
good.
photo real? I don't know.
It's
I don't know.
it's in a history book somewhere. So
Sure.
we
Yeah.
are told that it's real, and it is so psychedelic. It makes me feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Like even to think about like I think about like we are in a space race and like Russia is like the sworn enemy and like our dude is just like going over there and being celebrated by Russia. Like,
Well, obviously, the nation war, etcetera,
but if you tell that to people, they lose their
that's
minds.
fake.
They cannot contemplate that. It's like, how does this work? Like we are sworn enemies on Earth, but we're like all buddy buddy friends in outer space. Like, how does this work? How does this work?
It's a show. Gotta keep us in line. Gotta keep us scared. Gotta keep us divided.
But
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't.
they're all buddy buddy.
It's bizarre.
Mhm,
But I think
mhm.
I think this is better. Although I don't understand it completely. I think this is better than positing like this is some Shakespearean play and like the actors are just being subbed in and out.
I don't know. I tend to just think all things are possible and ask to be shown what I need to see.
I think they're different people.
The teeth call out, I think, is a good one.
I mean, it's just
It's
uncanny.
hard to know. It
I
is uncanny.
and I think this is like more wondrous. Like I think people
Yeah.
like want to find this to be like super salacious. Like, oh look, did you know that Neil and Yuri are the same person? I'll be like, I'll up the ante. The universe has arranged it in such a way so that you will think that, but they're not. And there's a
Mhm.
deeper alchemical process going on here. That's actually not the most enlightened perspective to think that they're the same person. The most enlightened perspective is to understand the conspiratorial nature of reality itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how it all works. I'm certainly open to what you're saying. Of course, obviously.
And speaking of synchronicity, you know, I'm always like super intrigued by these names. And Yuri Gagarin's name means George. It's like their Russian version of George, which essentially means farmer or earth worker. But Gagarin means water bird or loon, which is really fascinating on like a lot of different levels because though etymologically lunatic and loon come from different places, they get grouped together because I guess the loons go crazy, making all sorts of weird sounds, etc. So like loony birds and lunatics are kind of one interchangeable. So to have the last name Gagarin, which means loon, and then you're involved in the space race to the moon in some way is super interesting. But they're also like, I don't think loons are like very good flyers,
Mm.
and Yuri tragically like died. So it's another part of this compulsion of the name phenomenon that's going on here. And I haven't
Mhm.
really done this with Neil Armstrong. I mean, there's a lot that probably could be said about this. Armstrong's a great name for someone who's, you know, this hero figure for America. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
don't we have like other hero figures in our culture, like Lance Armstrong and like Stretch Armstrong or something like that? I don't know. It seems to be this recycled name for heroic type figures.
Mhm.
So I just thought there was some interesting synchronicity there going on there with his name.
For
Um,
sure.
yeah, I think that's good. If you want
Cool.
to say, I could stand to take a slight break and then we can
Yeah,
jump
let's
back into it. If that's okay?
let's yeah, let's do a timeout.
Okay. Okay. Um, so let's do slide 340. Okay. And this led to kind of an interesting little research dig. Where do I even want to go with this? Okay. So last week we talked about the astronauts as shamans, right? And the thing I was pointing out during that time is like how much like animal imagery is associated with the astronauts. And one of the things I pointed out was the Snoopy ears, like radio headset, like kind of like this was like some sort of like shamanic animal. And we speculated about like the kind of hidden meaning to all the different call signs, because the way that Snoopy is portrayed in was Apollo 10, wasn't it? Where the lander was named Snoopy, and like the command module was named Charlie Brown. That the association with Snoopy during Apollo 10 called to mind him fighting the Red Baron on top of his doghouse, and these imaginative scenarios where he is flying. And of course, like, if you read between the lines there, it's like, hey, this is imagination. Like, if you wanted to take it there. And perhaps when I think about Charlie Brown, I think about, Lucy pulling the football, this lovable loser who thinks he's going to get it, but it doesn't. That kind of got me thinking about the prevalence of all these different cartoon call signs that are associated with the different space missions. Um, Not too many people. Well, let me start here. The Apollo 16 command module was named Casper after Casper the Friendly Ghost. And the reason why they chose that supposedly was, I guess this is, I look at the astronauts walking on the moon, you can see through the astronauts. It's like very clear that like they look like ghosts. And there is a sciency reason for this, right? Something about the type of um, cameras they were using in 1969 to broadcast the landing back down to the moon, and the frequencies, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, sure, whatever. I mean, I think there's a deeper sort of message there, right? Like when you have like these apparitions on the moon, but they were aware of how it appeared, and so that's why they chose Casper for that. But even before the Apollo missions, the entire, it goes Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo missions. Even before the Apollo missions, they had the Gemini program. The problem is with this, and it is absolutely crazy, they didn't pronounce it Gemini. All the astronauts and all the ground control people and everything like that, if you go back and you like watch the documentary films on this, they all pronounce Gemini Jiminy. And it's like, why? Why are you not pronouncing it Gemini? And there's no real great answer for this. Someone just couldn't pronounce it correctly, and then it got amplified, and it became like a way to identify whether or not you were truly part of the NASA program if you pronounced it the wrong slash the incorrect slash correct way. Like if you called it the Gemini program, you clearly are uninitiated. Like you need to be calling it
Mhm.
Gemini. And it's like so it's like, wait, Gemini, like Gemini Cricket. And it's like, yes, like Jiminy Cricket. Although that's not the reason why they chose it. And the thing that's interesting about Jiminy Cricket is he's from Pinocchio, right? And then you go, oh, okay. It's just like another sort of message about perhaps the perils of lying. Okay. Also,
Mm.
Jiminy Cricket is Jiminy Cricket is a minced oath. It actually means Jesus Christ. So, like, if you don't want to say because you Jesus Christ, because you find that to be blasphemous, you would say Jiminy Cricket. So it's like, especially when we look at the alchemical aspect of everything, like we're like, okay, what's going on here? We actually have, in a roundabout way, we have an entire space program referencing Jesus Christ. And further, the program that Gemini or Jesus is associated with is the one that's about twins. And when you start digging into that, there's like this whole aspect of like Thomas, the twin of Jesus, and perhaps accounting for resurrection. So then we get like this
Mhm.
whole like Gnostic narrative that's potentially associated with the Gemini program. Maybe, maybe not. Like this is a question of like what's compelling and what's poetic license. I don't know. But something else like that came up while digging into this. I had forgotten. We've talked about the uh, the Columbia and the eagle a good bit when like trying to suss out like the mythological symbolism of it all. That those were not the original call signs that they gave for that. The original call signs for the eagle were haystack, and for the lunar or for the command module were snow cone. So imagine it's not the eagle that's landed, it's haystack that's landed. When I say haystack and snow cone, what do you think? Like
I
if you
mean,
just put on your squirrely detective hat for a second.
the snow cone, I don't get it. I don't get it unless it's like a snow cone's chance in hell.
I think that's what that's referencing because what's associated with the haystack?
Needle in a haystack.
Right. So the implication
Low
is
probability.
yeah, so they were naming their stuff about the two they did before they named it the Eagle and the Columbia, they're naming it after idiomatic expressions that have like
Mm,
next to no chance of obtaining. A snowball's chance in hell and a needle in a haystack. So it's like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing here? I don't know. There's more I
yeah.
could say about it. Um,
This bottom left poster, I think, adds fuel to the astronauts as shamans conversation.
yeah, tell me about that.
Well, the shaman goes on the journey and then brings back
Right.
basically the fruits of an alchemical journey experience back to the I'm probably not using the right words. I'm not initiated into any
Yeah.
of that, but like
Yeah.
back to the
Yeah.
patient or the client or like the tribe, the group. So the shamanistic astronaut is going out on behalf of the entire nation. It's not just
Right.
him going. He's the only one physically going on the journey, but he's a
Right.
proxy for the
Right.
whole tribe.
Right. One small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind.
Right. And then Charlie Brown, we've got the Aquarius chevron situation going on.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's interesting. That's another reference to Aquarius. They believe in was it maybe Apollo 13? The one of the modules was named Aquarius. That's an excellent insight. Yeah, that's an excellent insight.
Yeah, the Jiminy Cricket. That's interesting. Also, Pinocchio. Yes, Pinocchio is about lying, but it is also about how can we animate and bring life to something that is just
Yeah,
material, which I guess
yeah.
in a way is like lying. But it's
Well, but
not.
it's all, but
It's bigger than that. It's
it
not a lie. It's like can't it's a
yeah, I would.
magical incantation.
Well, I would say, yeah, Pinocchio is not a movie about the perils of lying. Maybe I shouldn't say that. It is a feature of that film that Pinocchio gives himself away with his growing nose, right? When he does lie. But
Right. And the
I
shadows give them away here.
yeah, but I love what you're saying here because it's like it's about the transformation of a puppet to a real boy. And that's really what it's about. And that gets into the quote that this whole thing led off with is that this is an alchemical journey. This is about the expansion of consciousness, right? In
Mhm.
one way or another. I don't think we fully understand this what's going on here, but you could the Pinocchio element could be about this great magnum this great work, this great opus that is happening through these different signs and symbols.
Mhm.
I
It's
buy
the
that. I buy
ensouling.
that.
It's like an ensoulment process.
Yeah, I buy that. I think that's a great observation. And I I don't know how to talk about it. I mean, like you and I saw a film not too long ago of that Kubrick is connected to that was motivated by like a lifelong obsession with Pinocchio, which was
Mhm.
AI, right? He called it, I guess it was called the Pinocchio Project for a long time. I, I really, I mean the the Gemini program was going on in like the mid '60s. Like I don't think I don't think Kubrick was involved in any way back then to get. So I don't. This could just be like cosmic coincidence.
Yeah. I mean, we're pulling from the Unus Mundus.
Yeah,
So who the heck knows?
yeah, yeah. I think that covers most of the things I want to say. But we want to keep going with this. If we go
Yeah,
to
of
like
course.
341. So I got deeper into this whole Gemini thing, Gemini. So, um, we've talked about the whole cosmic conception aspect to the moon landing or whatever. And wouldn't you know, the first time there was like a space docking between two separate aircraft or spacecraft happened on March 16th, 1966. And Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon, was one of the participants in Gemini 8, along with David Scott. And what they did there, I've kind of covered up the image a little bit. This is an illustration of the Gemini rendezvous and docking with pre-launched Agena target. So I guess what they had the Agena was unmanned. They had two separate launches. They had the Gemini, which was um, Armstrong and Scott, and then they linked up and did the space docking with the Agena. So I just
Mm.
hadn't known that. So it kind of contributes to this idea of it was a kind of a practice for like the conception aspect of what we've been talking about. And what's so interesting is kind of digging into Gemini mythology. This once again, the Gemini name was picked by Abraham Silverstein. We've looked into the compulsion of his name being the father of the silver stone, the father of many nations and the silver stone. And it kind of makes sense, right? Like Gemini, the twins, and you have these two-person crews in these capsules. But who were the Gemini twins? And you perhaps already know this. This we're going to see the Zeus connections again because the Gemini twins were Castor, the mortal son of King Tyndareus, and Pollux, the immortal son of Zeus, via Leda's swan encounter. And they were half brothers renowned for their inseparable bond. Skilled in horsemanship, that was Castor, and boxing, Pollux, they joined the Argonauts' quest for the Golden Fleece. and were celebrated as protectors of sailors, appearing as St. Elmo's fire during storms to signal safety. When Castor died in a feud, Pollux shared his immortality, allowing them to alternate between the underworld and Olympus, eventually becoming the Gemini constellation. So that just phrases everything for us. And I think it's great because, with the astronaut name, those are star sailors. This is yet another connection that we have to the Golden Fleece or to Jason and the Argonauts. And I it's becoming very obvious. I mean, it should have been obvious a long time ago that a deeper read of that story is going to be necessary for us to fully understand like what is going on here. I can't help but wonder if there's like kind of a joke in this too, right? Like a double entendre, like the when you fleece someone, right? Like you like especially a golden fleece, right? It's like a fleecing
Yeah.
of the public. I wonder if that's happening as well, but probably not. Um, and we've talked a little bit about this about the twins duality. You've got one that's mortal slash divine, or and the earth and heaven connections, perhaps mirroring the Jungian tension of the opposites. Now, there was a little bit more that I wanted to. Oh, there's layer on here. So we talked about how the Gemini potentially, in a roundabout way, may be referencing Jesus Christ. Um, this kind of feeds into a potential Gnostic thread going on here because the twins, one is mortal and the other is divine, which kind of speaks to the dual aspect of Jesus, who is a combination of mortal and divine. And I thought that was very interesting. And staying on this biblical thread, I had no idea, but Castor and Pollux, the Gemini twins, are actually in the Bible. Um, Paul, it's recorded in Acts 28:11. Like Paul is like stranded on an island for like 3 months, and he's picked up by a ship, and they have like a masthead of Castor and Pollux because they were associated with the protection of ships and St. Elmo's fire. St. Elmo's fire is like this coronal like ejection thing, which is super crazy in and of itself, and how that plays into all of this. But it says in Acts 28:11, and after 3 months, we departed in a ship of Alexandria, which had wintered in the isle, whose sign was Castor and Pollux. So it gives us like a taste of like how early Christians were like still like interacting and perhaps had no problem. He's not like, oh, I can't get on your ship because it's got these like pagan twins on it. Like, and it picked him up. And so like you can see like there's like this esoteric narrative like going on between these Gemini twins and Jesus and Paul, like this major missionary and spreader of Christianity. And I think that kind of gets, we've looked at this before, like the cosmic conception aspect of the moon landings, and how, you know, it seems like the Virgin Mary is one of these great mothers that's associated with the moon. We've also talked about like Hecate and Diana and Artemis. So it's like a blend between these pagan and Christian archetypes going on here. I'm not exactly sure how to understand this, like, but we have this weaving going on between the Greek and the biblical narratives. So I thought that was super fascinating. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm just kind of finishing up here, and then I'll let you kind of riff on it. So the Agena, the unmanned thing that they launched, I was like, what is Agena? Agena, it means knee, and it's the other name for Agena is Beta Centauri, and Beta Centauri is part of a larger constellation known as Centaurus. So essentially, this unmanned aspect of the Gemini 8 docking was named after a portion of the Centaurus constellation. So that's cool. But who the heck is Centaurus? Well, Centaurus, his name was Chiron, and Chiron has a connection. It just so happens, and I think the way that they say it's like, oh, well, we just wanted to name something after a bright star. It turns out that Chiron, the centaur, actually has a connection to the Gemini twins. Chiron was unlike other centaurs. He was considered to be a wise tutor to many heroes, and he actually tutored Castor and Pollux. And so it kind of all these things are brought together in this mythological biblical soup here. And Chiron was the immortal son of the Titan Cronus, or Saturn, right? As we may know him. And he mentored other Greek heroes like Jason, Achilles, and Heracles. So there's more to it. Heracles was attacked by a mob of wild centaurs while visiting the centaur Pholus. An arrow Heracles fired, poisoned with the blood of Lernaean Hydra, accidentally struck Chiron. The wound was incurable. To end his suffering, Chiron gave up his immortality to free Prometheus, was placed in the stars by Zeus. And we've already looked at there's a Promethean element, like the trickster god to all of this, when we looked at Michael Collins' book, Carrying the Fire, and how that was a reference to Prometheus. So these were all the interesting things. There's a lot to unpack here. What jumped out to you? I feel like this would melt anybody's mind if they came across this, but they're not going to get an hour and a half into this thing and do that. What do you think? Do you find any of this interesting?
Oh, it's fascinating. I'm not sure I have much to add about this in particular. I'm kind of just absorbing it and thinking about the Gemini. The layers are endless.
Right. Like, is it just like that everything's connected to everything, or is like there a
Maybe
coherent narrative here?
both? Like, can it be both?
I mean, what are the odds that they would name it? Supposedly the name, like, I think it had something to do with the naming convention of the rockets that they were using at the time in the military. Like, things had to kind of line up. I don't think anyone at NASA, at least publicly, even knew that there was a connection between Agena and the Gemini twins. They were just like, oh yeah, we'll use this rocket from the military. Maybe somebody did, but like, 20 minutes of research, I found out that it's connected to Chiron, and Chiron
Mhm.
tutored the Gemini twins. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And like, this is practice, right? Like, this is, so we have an element of Chiron, like showing the twins, like, this is how you do it. Like, this is how you
Mm.
dock. So there's like that element of like mentoring here,
Mhm.
and it's unmanned too, right? Like, that could be an interesting aspect to this.
Yeah, super fascinating. Is there anything that for you, the centaur nature of Chiron, like I'm
I'm,
sure that's part of this. I'm not really quite putting together what the significance of that would be.
I, I mean, the thing is, it's like, it's this hybridization that's going on here. Like,
Mhm.
you have this snapshot of a Greek narrative, a story about the tutelage of the Gemini twins. And you have another narrative that seems to also be in play, which is the Gnostic narrative about, Jesus not really resurrecting, and this being like a swap out between
Mhm.
him and Thomas, and that there isn't some sort of real ascension here. But like, I don't know how these things go together.
I don't
I
either.
don't.
I
I
don't
don't.
either.
They just
It
both
it
seem to be in play.
it's interesting that you're also kind of pointing out the Greek stories and the biblical stories and then the modern science religion stories are all echoing the same
Yeah.
underlying stuff.
It's just like in the background.
Uh-huh. It just keeps playing out
It's
over
it's
and
the
over.
churning of the universe's alchemy.
No matter how far away we believe that we are from mythology, we are
No.
clearly still in it.
Yeah. Clearly. Deeply. Okay. What's the next slide? Oh, yeah, more on I found another rabbit. This is
Oh.
fun. I love finding rabbits because these are our little tricksters, right? Um, so if you go to slide 342, which I bet you already have up, yeah. So Apollo 16, was it Apollo 16? Yes, Apollo 16. The lunar module was named Orion. Yeah, we got on this because the command module was named Casper, right? And we talked about like ghosts not being real and they're, you know, all this other stuff, like the apparitional aspect of the astronauts. Um, if you look at the Great Sky Clock, Orion. Now they have their own reasons for why they chose Orion, but the constellation Orion is intimately linked with this other constellation named Lepus, which is the rabbit or hare. And you can see it perhaps drawn a little bit better here by on Hevelius's Prodromus Astronomiae, volume 3. Um, you can see the hare is at the feet of Orion, and this is Orion supposedly on the moon on April 22nd, 1972, in the far left corner. Um, this is the one that John Young, the synchronistically named John Young, is on. So there, I guess what I'm trying to say here is because Orion is the hunter, he's often hunting wabbit. Okay, so in a way, you could argue that there is sort of like another latent rabbit in the background because they've invoked the Orion lander in such a way. It's not strong. It's not like doing the bunny hop on the moon or bringing the Playboy playmates on the moon and stuff like that. But there, there's a when you think Orion, he is often classically portrayed with a rabbit, and that also happens when you visualize the constellations in this way. I mean, do you find that interesting? Maybe it's not the most compelling example. It's just a category we're building on.
Yeah, I mean, it's super fascinating. We've got
I
a
mean,
little 22 Easter egg for me. Always pay
yeah.
attention to that.
I didn't get into it. Like I think there is some I didn't have a chance to research it, but I think there's some connection to Easter eggs and rabbits and Orion, but I I did not have a chance to get into it. I'll
Yeah.
make a note for next time.
Yeah, there probably is more there. This Descartes Highlands thing has
Yeah, that's
got my attention.
we haven't talked about this too much, but like the landing maps of all the Apollo missions are so incredibly alchemical. And the fact that they like landed in like Descartes crater on Apollo
Mhm.
16. I haven't had a chance to like really think about this like all the way through, but like when I think about Descartes, like and what I think about are cogito ergo sum, right? I think therefore I am. It's like please think, right? Like if you want to truly exist, like please use your brain on this, right? And also I think about like Descartes like evil demon, right? Like the
Mm,
idea that like he gets the cogito because like it's possible that there's like this evil demon who's deceiving him about everything, but the only thing he can't be fooled of, the only thing that he can't be tricked of, right, is the fact that he's a thinking thing. So this
mm.
gets into the whole idea of like we live in complete illusion. Those are the two. There's lots of other things that are associated with Descartes, optics being one of them, but I'm rusty on all of it. But the two big things I think are those things. What do you think of when you think of Descartes?
Oh man, it's been so long.
Geometry, maybe like
Let's see.
Cartesian geometry. It's been a long
Yeah,
time.
I mean, I don't know, it's been so long since I got into it. I mean, isn't dualism
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The pineal gland, right? Like he's the guy who thought
Yeah.
like that's where like the dualistic interactionism was happening.
Yeah. I think that's probably what I got the deepest
That's a
into
yeah. That's he thought the
when reading
soul was in the
him.
pineal gland.
Yeah, something to that. Something's going on there, that's for sure. Yeah.
It this might be a little hint too. Like Cartesian, like the Cartesian grid is
Mm.
a Cartesian plane is a two-dimensional flat surface defined by two perpendicular lines, the x and y
Oh,
axis.
interesting.
So, we don't need to get into it, but this could be kind of a planar,
Well, that's
yeah, in joke.
I don't know, like, how relevant, irrelevant this is, but thinking about the 2 creating a plane, right? When I see the cross or when I see the ankh,
Hmm.
it's 2 lines intersecting with the spirit, and that's kinda dualism
Yeah,
conceptually as well. It's like the intersection of the material, the spiritual creates this, like, grid, basically, this illusory grid. And earlier in the Fraser, I think we talked about this last week or the week before, like the soul and the body have to really be integrated to even be able to experience this reality, this realm. You could call it an illusion.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I got to thinking a little bit about the cross too, because if you want to go back a
Right. In the
slide or
private,
two,
yeah.
with the Centaurus constellation, you'll see
Yes.
there's the crux underneath it. It's its own constellation. So I've not gone into this crux constellation, and you know what that seems to be emblematic of. I have no idea if the crux constellation has anything to do with Jesus Christ, but it seems like we have the Greek mythology mixed together with the Bible story, and it's all
Yeah.
mixed together here in this Gemini 8 docking.
Hmm.
I haven't even gone. It spiraled about the number 8 and why that might be significant for all of this.
We'll have to get to the numbers.
I sent you a message. Okay, so now we're going to transition to the part of the presentation concerning this Nietzschean element within the synchronicity of the moon landings of Woodstock. Okay, so just kind of as a refresher, and this video from Fadia Kill was like a good refresher. Essentially, the idea for Nietzsche and the birth of tragedy is that there are these two metaphysical impulses that the Greeks had identified: the Apollonian tendency, he's the god of sun, truth, light, and logic, the rational thinking aspect, and then the Dionysian. Dionysus is the god of wine, festivals, madness, chaos, irregularity, and it blurs the boundary of self and nature. So, Ayn Rand had picked up on this, and she gave like an hour long talk and then like an hour of Q&A. I think gosh, where did she do it? It's Ford um, forum. I forget what school, but it was good to see that someone else had picked up on this, right? And the way that she frames things is that ultimately, like the moon landing was truly an Apollonian project, and it was this conquest of the rational over nature, and that it reflects the rational ethos of common Americans, and that this is kind of like what makes America great in terms of it being a successful capitalistic society. And then she contrasts that with the chaos of Woodstock and how The uh, at this particular moment in time, we are being presented with this choice on the timeline. She doesn't really speculate where this choice is coming from, between choosing from the orderly Apollonian tendency that has allowed America to progress to the stars, right? She mentions how like 1 million people went to go see the Apollo 11 launch, which I think she attended, though she does not say in this particular lecture that she gave, and how pretty much they like came and went with like very little fanfare, and much hubbub is made about how like a bunch of hippies like doing a ton of drugs in at Woodstock like managed to like not kill themselves over this weekend of music, and there were like 300,000 of them, 300,000 of them, or 400,000 depending on the estimate, and a lot of the reason why they weren't able to completely plunge into anarchy is that there were those who embodied the Apollonian influence, like doctors and emergency workers, around there to address any issues as they came up. And she she's like, look, it's pretty clear what direction where to go. And Rand is like a big cheerleader for the Apollo missions. She thinks they're totally real. She thinks they're this great triumph of the human spirit, etc. That's not really what Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy is about. That we have to make this choice. It's a commentary on like Greek tragedy and how it all functions together in order to give like this wondrous aesthetic experience. It's more complicated than that. She kind of reduces it to this choice, and she makes it pretty clear where she falls out on all of this. I don't, Jordan, can you read that? These are the last two paragraphs of the speech that she gave.
Yeah, of course. You have all heard the old bromide to the effect that man has his eyes on the stars and his feet in the mud. It is usually taken to mean that man's reason and his physical senses are the elements pulling him down to the mud, while his mystical, super rational emotions are the element that lifts him to the stars. This is the grimmest inversion of many in the course of mankind's history. But last summer, reality offered you a literal dramatization of the truth. It is man's irrational emotions that bring him down to the mud. It is man's reason that lifts him to the stars.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's mystifying to me that she didn't. I think she just thought it was a coincidence. You know, you probably know more about Ayn Rand than I do. I imagine that you went through like an Ayn Rand phase at some point. I never really did, but my understanding of like objectivism is that it doesn't really interest itself too much in like religious matters, right? It's not really all that interested in traditional religion. So it's curious that she was able to pick up on the synchronicity, but was not really motivated to think about how the reality conspired in such a way to present this choice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. And I'm sitting here being like, no, let's get to the metaphysical understanding. So this gets into an interesting question about like how Nietzsche fits into this like alchemical work that like the universe is like scripting, right? Like, and interestingly enough, Jung does write on this in Psychological Types. I have not had a chance to go through it, but there he does have a chapter called the
Mhm.
Apollonian and the Dionysian. I don't know how much more we'll be able to wring out of this. I think in general, what he's doing is like trying to use his personality type ideas to categorize the Apollonian and Dionysian instincts. But to really understand that, we'll have to go deeper into it. So we have, I guess what I'm trying to say is we have some threads, we have some clues as far as the direction to take. Um, a little snippet that I have here. Carl Jung applied Nietzsche's Apollonian and Dionysian concepts to the human psyche, viewing them as fundamental opposites. Apollonian embodies the rational, individualistic, and ordered aspects. Yeah, we got all that. While Dionysian represents the instinctual, chaotic, and collective forces of the unconscious, which we talked a little bit about when we were talking about the intellectual heritage of those psyche maps that we addressed like in the first like 20 minutes or first half hour or so. So I don't know. Are we any closer to like solving this mystery, Batman? I mean, what are you, or Robin, or whoever you are?
Which mystery? I feel like every
Yeah.
one we get
Yeah.
into opens up like 20 more.
I could this is a book right here. This
Yeah.
slide is a whole book project.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
So
It sure is. I wonder, so like we've talked about going up a level, basically with general conspiracy theory. It's like, okay, let's take a step up and kind of view it from that. I wonder at what point of going through all of this will you kind of find a new level kind of to step up into and kind of integrate these things a little bit
yeah.
more.
Yeah. I mean, unless you're like, what are the alternatives here? Is that okay? Like a bunch of people at like the CIA read Nietzsche, they read The Birth of Tragedy, and they're like, hey, you know what we really need? We're gonna, stage this whole moon landing thing. We gotta throw this crazy rock concert too, and this will like really synthesize the different aspects of the human psyche, so people will be like really bought in
Mm-hmm.
somehow emotionally to this big theatrical event that we're pulling off. Like, are we? And I know,
Well,
like, there's people out there that think like Woodstock was like a hoax.
yeah.
I mean, it's
Yes,
weird.
me.
You know what I'm saying? Like that it was like made in a studio or something like that. Do you really think that? All of it?
It's possible there was an event. What we are shown does not hold up to scrutiny. And the moon is a key into that. But I must give credit to Crow on that
Yeah.
one. I would not have picked that out if he hadn't said it, but you
It's
can go
strange.
find it.
There's strange stuff. Like what do you recall what he says that made you I remember at some point coming across it and being like, oh yeah, I could see that. Like there was some weird I don't know if there's weird stuff.
Well, rationally, the logistics don't make sense, especially after the whole Fire Festival, I think it was, like FYRE debacle that
Oh
happened
yeah.
5 years ago. I don't remember when that happened. It feels both like yesterday and forever ago.
Mm-hmm.
Just logistically, it does not make sense. The more you dig into it, the more weird anomalies there are. And it's like, this did not happen in the way that they said it did. And then taking a step back and seeing how much it's shoved down our throats culturally, even today, even if it's real on some level, it is obviously propaganda. It is obviously a programming tool. But the thing that he pointed out that was the most damning to me is if you watch the sky in the footage, it's clearly not the same day. It's pieced together.
Oh, I have to
You
I
look
have a
at the
lot to I have
phases
a
of the
lot to
moon,
review.
the
Yeah.
phases of the moon
Oh, well
revealing.
that'll give it away. Yeah.
It's this isn't like crazy stuff, which is also fascinating since this is a sister event. It's a twin event. It's like the opposite, the Gemini. it, it's the twin.
Did Jefferson Airplane perform White Rabbit
I
at
don't know.
Woodstock?
Google
Woodstock?
it.
That'd be kind of amazing if they did. Yeah, they did.
What more do we need to know?
Oh, wow, a lot. I'm not.
Dig into
I
it. Dig into it.
I there's a.
I'm
I'm
compelled.
open to it. I'm open to it. I mean, look, I think like a bunch of stuff was like made in like secret government studios and things like that. But I mean, there are plenty of people who say they've been to Woodstock.
Again, well, also like how hard is it to program and brainwash people?
Yeah.
We were having a different conversation about this week.
Yeah. Yep.
But
I
did
hear
it happen at all? I don't know. Maybe, but the way that it's presented
Yeah.
is made up. Like
Okay.
so many things.
All right. I'll dig into it. I'll make another note.
Yeah, you don't have to believe me. But it's fascinating that the moon is the key in so many ways here when
That is interesting.
the Apollo mission is like the other.
I wish the Woodstock Festival was actually like concurrently happening with the moon landing. Like it's like 3
Yeah.
weeks later. Like I really wish like while they were landing on the moon, like Jimi Hendrix was ripping like the national anthem solo. Like that
Is
would
there
have been
anything
so
with the
epic. And like
dates?
Neil Armstrong's like putting the flag on the moon and Jimmy's like "Rear, rear." Like that would be so effing epic.
It would be crazy. I mean, the Woodstock
Yeah.
Snoopy, we already covered
Yes.
this, but there's
There's a lot of combinations.
I bet if we dug into it, there would be more. An Aquarian exposition.
Yeah.
We already spiraled about this last
Yeah.
week, but
Yeah. Yeah.
White Lake. What's at White Lake?
Right. Right.
And then NASA is at Clear Lake in Houston.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. I I wonder if like anybody was like talking about it at Woodstock. You know, the counter. Oh, one of the interesting things that Rand makes. Oh gosh, she makes a lot of really interesting points. In her lecture, she points out that like artists and intellectuals like in the academy like were like kind of universally panning the moon landing like they were
Mm,
all like not impressed. Oh, we should talk about like, and that's like kind of one of the reasons why there was like no good art inspired by the moon landing. We've talked about this in a variety of different other
yep.
podcasts. Like there's like no great poems. Like we looked at Auden's moon landing poem. Like why did it inspire so
It
little
turns
art?
out Auden might be tied into this whole
Maybe we got to do some more
it's a
research on that.
footnote in a book.
Yeah. Okay. But what I'm trying to say here is what Rand is saying is that intellectuals and artists are fundamentally Dionysian. And because they are fundamentally Dionysian, they're anti-reason. Okay. So that's why like they could not grasp the moon landing in any sort of meaningful way and actually kind of like dumped on it as like a waste of money, right? There's like this all this stuff like it really should have been used for something else. Like I don't know if you that Gil Scott Heron song like Whitey on the Moon and all this other stuff. Like a lot of people of that persuasion be like, okay, great, like we landed on the moon, like where are we going with this? And she was trying to make the point that this divide in the culture actually reveals that the supposed superior artistic and intellectual class is like completely captured by like chaotic emotion and have nothing to offer from a rational standpoint ever. Like that's a big deal because it accounts for the lack of the art, which I think is kind of appropriate and is a major indictment of these industries and these institutions. And it makes me like kind of rethink like my whole participation in both of them.
It is interesting. It's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it at all until Rand brought it to your attention and you brought it to mine.
Yeah. I mean, we've been scratching our heads the entire time. Like, why isn't there more moon landing inspired stuff?
Well,
Because it goes against the Dionysian impulse that like that that control those levers of
but also,
creation.
is that true? It's not true today. It was true at the time
Which part?
that there is no art inspired by it.
I mean, there's a
Now,
little bit like I mean, this is an interesting question. Like they made this whole like First Man movie with what's his name, Ryan. It's not Ryan Reynolds. With the other Ryan, the Barbie Ryan, Ken. What's his name?
oh,
But he's like Neil Armstrong. It's like, okay, is this why was this movie made now? Is this like art or is this like, oh, the narrative's crumbling, let's reinforce it?
yeah. I mean, most of the examples I'm thinking of would fall into what I would call propaganda. But there was that one movie we were watching, and then they had like the Moonlander show up at the end of it. We are like, oh, let's just watch a fun movie. It was about.
I don't know. We're rambling.
Okay.
Let's well,
Okay.
we got serious work to do
I
here. We're not just
know.
on here to shoot
Well,
the shit.
we can't speculate about Auden, so
Well, what did you want to say about Auden?
I'm just teasing. I'm
What did
teasing.
you have about Auden?
No, no, no. Let's keep going.
No, if you said you found something about him.
Oh, it was just a footnote, not literally a footnote, but it was like one sentence in the book about the Tavistock Institute that kind of ties him in with these cultural change makers who were tied to these, like, they're describing it as like pagan initiated people, but like basically an elite class of artists, etc., who were some potentially used to
Which
push.
Tavistock book is this?
Let me look up the author, the Tavistock Institute. There's a subtitle. It's really good.
I mean, maybe there's something here just on.
I don't think I think we can keep it moving.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. I'll
Yeah.
dig deeper into the connection of Tavistock, but
It- I don't think it's worth it. But the most recent point I was trying to make, like obviously the Kubrick stuff all is like laden with imagery of it. But it's an interesting point. Like at the time, we can't find much art around it from that era. Why is it reemerging now?
is it? I mean, you say it is. I'm not sure it is.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm not trying to be disputatious. I can't. It depends on what we're calling art. It sounds like.
Okay.
Okay.
Movies.
It's propaganda art. That's what I'm asking.
Oh, okay.
All right. Okay.
Well, okay. I'll let it go.
Yeah, let's move on. We're just shooting the shit right now. Okay. Let's talk Edward Edinger. Okay, this is from that Anatomy of the Psyche book. And this led into a very profound research dig on the moon tree. Like this whole moon tree thing is like, oh, like this is like this incidental little like story that's wrapped up in the Apollo missions. That with very little fanfare, they've brought it back for the Artemis missions. You can see they're planting these moon trees. I've got an image of these Artemis astronauts planting these moon trees again. So it's really important. And I think I found a deeper layer to it. I'm going to read this passage from Anatomy of the Psyche. It's from page 111 to 112. According to ancient thinking, the moon, as the planet closest to Earth, was the gateway between the celestial and the earthly realms. All spiritual entities on the way to embodiment were funneled through the moon where they were materialized. Yakaburma says the seventh form is called Luna. The property of all the six forms lies therein, and it is a corporeal being of all the rest. For the other forms do all cast their desire through soul into Luna. For in soul they are spiritual, and in Luna corporeal. Whatever the sun is and makes in the spirit life in itself, the same Luna is and makes corporeal in itself. Luna's association to coagulatio indicates that the latter is governed by the feminine principle. This is also indicated by the feminine nature of earth, matter, mater, and the fact that we can be incarnated only through a feminine womb. Any specific form, manifestation, or structure that solidifies our life energies into particular concrete expression is of the nature of woman. Country, church, community, institution, family, vocation, avocation, personal relationship, all enlist our commitment via the feminine principle. Even apparent abstractions such as science, wisdom, truth, beauty, liberty, and so forth, when they are served in a concrete and realistic way, are experienced as personification of the feminine. Jung has defined the feminine principle as the principle of relatedness. Thus, we can say relationship coagulates. It's a very important fact for psychotherapy and warrants some discussion. Okay. So, thinking about this, like the fact that the moon is like kind of this cosmic womb through all the energies of the universe are coming through, right? This alchemically, I was like kind of searching for like images that would portray it. He's got Mary here from the book of Revelation, Revelation 12, on the moon with the crown of stars above her head. We talked about this before, and it's good to see someone else picking up on that. But alchemically, these renditions, one of these is from the Rosarium Philosophorum. to kind of capture this idea. We have Sol and Luna merged together in a hermaphrodite on top of the moon. And then you see this, you see either like snakes or you see what over here to the left, Jordan. This is a moon tree. It's actually called a moon tree. It shares the exact same name as these moon trees they've been flying around in Apollo and Artemis. And that seems like a really big deal. They also go by um, Diana's tree, the reference this. So it's like alchemical picture language, but also this was like a real alchemical process that alchemists did in order to obtain the Philosopher's Stone, which I've got to go so much deeper into all of this. But from Wikipedia, Diana's tree, also known as the Philosopher's Tree, was considered a precursor to the Philosopher's Stone and resembled coral in regards to its structure. It is a dendritic amalgam of crystallized silver obtained from mercury in a solution of silver nitrate, so called by the alchemists, among whom Diana, goddess of the moon, stood for silver, planetary metal of the moon. So there, I mean, they're not doing like experiments in the capsules of these like coral looking trees or whatever, but they have the exact same name. So it's pictorially, it's putting us into this universe, and it raises very interesting questions about the purpose of these moon landings. Like, what energies are they allowing to incarnate into our earthly realm? I'll pause there if you want to get in on this.
Yeah, this whole thing is super trippy.
Yeah.
And I think later you include some of the images from I forget which book of Young's,
The
but
Rosarium Philosophorum.
yes, yes. Right here on the moon tree, I imagine like the faces are like the moon, I guess. But there's 13 of them.
That's interesting. I hadn't counted them up. Is that so?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it kind of demonstrates how you've described 13's energy to me. You have the 12, the 6 on both sides. Make sure I got that right. Yeah. You have the 6 on both sides, like the stable, the 12, the totality, the unus mundus, the 12 apostles, the 12 zodiac, et cetera, et cetera, et
Yeah. Yeah.
cetera. And then you have the 13th on the top, kind of like, at, like kind of breaking the foundational cycle, like breaking through it.
It might be relevant. I don't know. See, this I've got to go deeper. Let's go to the next slide if
Yeah,
we can, because that what you're talking
of
about
course.
like feeds into the next slide.
Yeah.
So surprise, surprise, like this moon tree thing is going to connect back to Young. So Young, these images, the one that Jordan's talking about, comes from the Rosarium Philosophorum, which I think means the rosary of the philosophers.
I believe so.
It just the Rosary of the Philosophers is a 16th century alchemical treatise. It was published in 1550 as part 2 of the De Alchemia Opuscula Complura Veterum Philosophorum. The term rosary in the title is unrelated to Catholic prayer beads. It refers to a rose garden metaphoric of an anthology, a collection of wise sayings. I've got to go way deeper into it, but it is on archive. I've not read through it, and I've been meaning to do this ever since we looked at Dr. Young's stone when we did that video. This is actually a slide from that old presentation, but Young did a Jungian analysis of all these images and the Rosarium Philosophorum in the psychology of the transference, and then it got packaged into the practice of psychotherapy, which I think it says that's volume 20 or Bolligen series 20, but I think it might be volume 16.
It says
Anyway,
16 on the cover.
does it say 16? Yeah. Because
Yeah.
I was trying to make sure I had this the
Yeah.
other day. So, like many things, guess what? I got to read this and figure it out. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is since we're so deep into the alchemy of all this moon landing stuff, the trail is going back to this essay, this book. The
Yeah.
the the you got a young book with moon trees in it that's based off of the Rosarium Philosophorum. What I
Yep.
don't know what else to say. I can't, I'm just going where the trail's leading.
Man, I just stared at this for
Have
hours.
you read this before?
I read parts of it. I have not read all of volume 16. I got super fixated on the Rosarium Philosophorum last summer when I was obsessed with Mithraism and all of the like pre-Platonic stuff. Because there's there's overlap,
Yeah.
seemingly.
Yeah.
I can't say I have an intellectual understanding of this. And even today, more of this makes sense to me. I know a little bit more of the symbols and how they're at least being used.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, you could for real just meditate with this for a very long time.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on.
All right. I don't have much more to say about it, and I want to get through these things in under 3 hours. So let's progress to the next one. The next one's kind of a
Okay.
recapitulation of stuff that we've talked about in a roundabout way. These are backlog slides, but the we did a little bit of a short on the moon trees. Here's one that's in Arkansas. Um, so I won't go into too much more detail about this. This Ephedra alata is supposedly the soma producing plant that was also connected to moon tree discussions in mythology, specifically um, the Hindu god Chandra, and this inspired Soma from Brave New World, which happens to feature Keir Dalia in the made for TV movie, et cetera, et cetera. And then we talked about how these moon trees are somehow connected to potentially a story about Jack and the Beanstalk, and the Tree of Life. A couple new things that I wanted to add here is I found it kind of interesting, like this photo of Apollo 14 standing in front of the Saturn rocket. It got me thinking about how Saturn eats children or ate his children, and
Hmm.
how the how the giant in Jack and the Beanstalk eats children. And it was interesting to me, the Disney portrayal, and the connections between Disney and NASA are like extensive, of this giant. He has red hair, and one of the people that's like primarily responsible for these moon trees is Stuart Russo, who has red hair. So is this a meaningful connection or just like a synchronicity? That's probably the case. Um, this entry on Soma from my Penguin dictionary thing, some say it was the sap of honey of immortality carried by an eagle to mortals. I thought it was interesting that an eagle carried the Soma, and we've been talking about the eagle
Mm.
landing. And again, we've talked about how it allows for a static union with the Godhead. We've covered all these things. I'm kind of going fast through here because it sets up other stuff. So let's go to the next slide. Okay. So what do I want to say about this? Something that I realized when we got deeper into this moon tree stuff, its connection to Apollo 14. Um, I'll just go left to right. Okay. So the two astronauts that were the moonwalkers on Apollo 14 are Edgar Mitchell and Alan Shepard. Okay. And the one that flew around is Stuart Russo. Okay. So it's like Edgar, Alan, and then like Poe. Like this is like leading you to go Edgar Allan Poe, right? Like this is kind of what this seems to cryptically allude to. And this is like kind of significant on like a lot of different levels because um Edgar Allan Poe had like a pretty profound influence on space flight for like a lot of different reasons. He he wrote a story called The Unparalleled Adventures of One Hans Pfaall, which I think was about taking a hot air balloon to the moon, which in some way inspired Jules Verne's From Earth to the Moon, which had so many like of these uncanny synchronicities, and they even give homage to it in some way in the Apollo missions. It's kind of laid this blueprint for the Apollo missions to get up off the ground. Like there's so many
Mm.
similarities to it. I don't know if you ever looked at this. Like they launch from the same place, the same number of crew. Uh, like the differences really are like he had him like being shot out of a cannon or something like that rather than a rocket. But otherwise, it's like there's a lot of like uncanny syncs. Not to mention, he's also associated with moon hoaxes because apparently the Great Moon Hoax, I believe of 1835, he claims was like a total ripoff of the unparalleled adventures of Hans Pfaall. It's a whole other side story. But Poe also had like visionary experiences where he was like able to predict the future. Poe like didn't really know very much about science and like had bad eyesight and stuff like that. And he wrote this prose poem, which is absolutely astounding, called Eureka, where he
Mm.
essentially like anticipates the Big Bang theory. So there's this idea of like Poe in some way like having knowledge he shouldn't have about the future. And what's interesting about Apollo 14, Edgar Mitchell brought this element of ESP into it. You can see he's down here with JB Rhine at who he was really influenced by. He even took like Zener cards into outer space so that they could do like ESP experiments. And so there's this ESP connection between Edgar Allan and Poe, which is pretty fascinating. Not to mention, like we've looked at like the statistical probability of like double names and stuff like that. Like we looked at all the
Mhm.
different Jacks. There's multiple Allens. There's Alan Shepard and Alan Bean. So 2 of the 12 moonwalkers are Allens. So it's like really demanding our attention. But this JB Rhine character connects us. Jung drew a lot of his theories on synchronicity from the work of JB Rhine. And so it kind of just creates this swirl, this synchronistic fractal and swirl involving Poe, involving the astronauts, and involving Carl Jung with via JB Rhine. Not to mention, there's lots of Poe references in Kubrick, specifically in Strangelove. We have the scribblings of, I believe, Jack the Ripper, who talks about purity of essence and peace on earth. And in Lolita, we have the recitation of the poem Eula Moon and Eula and a reference to the divine Edgar. And we have Edgar Mitchell, who had like a divine mystical experience in outer space. So just all of this is a lot. This is all of this is a lot. But going back to the whole Jack and the Beanstalk thing, when looking at the moon trees from Apollo 14, I was like, yeah, they just took a bunch of um they just took like a bunch of seeds to the moon. And then I went back and I looked at it. They actually they took hundreds of them, but they took 5 different types.
Mhm.
And if like I was like, maybe I'm like reaching a little too much on this whole Jack and the Beanstalk narrative and whatever, but Jack in Jack and the Beanstalk trades Milky White for 5 beans. And that seems to make it a little bit tighter to me. And also, you mentioned this earlier, like Jung has like this concept of numinosity that he attaches to certain archetypes and specifically numerical archetypes 1 through
Yeah.
9, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, have like sacred numinosity associated with them. And then he has other ones. We've looked at 12, we've looked at 13, we're going to look at 13, but 5 is one of them. And I don't know if you want to read this quote from the Collected Works 18.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
The very numbers you use in counting are more than you take them for. They are at the same time mythological entities. For the Pythagoreans, they were even divine. But you are certainly unaware of this when you use numbers for a practical purpose.
Right. So, I mean, I don't know. I could what the number 5 means. You know, I had Grok put together a little list. I mean, I'm not. It's all very tentative. I don't trust it when it does this stuff. I think its quotations are generally right, and we'll look at it in a second. But when you just kind of what I know about the number 5 and thinking about it, it's like it's really connected to the human body. right? Because we have like, we have a head and four appendages, right? So that seems to be significant from a Jungian understanding of this. And why were there five different types of seeds that went around the moon? Why are there
Mm,
five? Is this somehow connected to like the pentacle, like to pentagrams as well? You know, what's going on here? It seems to involve the human form in some way. And
yeah.
I mean, I don't know where to take it beyond that, but yeah.
In the, I think, minor arcana and tarot,
You
which
know more
Jung
than me.
said he didn't study much, which is interesting. But it's often like this, like tenuous points. So you have in the minor arcana, you have the suits from ace through king and knight or whatever. But you have like all the numbers in between. And the five is often this. So like it kind of goes through these cycles of like page, of newness, to like working through like different conflict points. And then like four is super stable. Like you think of a table, it's like foundational. Then five is kind of another one of these sort of disruptive. It's not like the most disruptive number in all of them, but it's like kind of unsettling. Like it's often conflict or like, yeah. And then in the major arcana, you have the Hierophant, I think is how you say that. So like the priest um is the five. So none of that to say like that has to be what this means, but these numbers do echo kind of through those traditions. And I think they're maybe data points
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the priest who like is initiated in the esoteric. He
Yeah.
knows. Yeah. The first off, the first time I learned that there was a moon hoax in the 1800s, I was like,
Yeah.
what? What?
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything's just, it's hilarious. And I didn't realize or remember that it was published in the Sun, which you have
Yeah.
photographed here.
Again.
The the moon and the sun. Yeah, the moon hoax
It was
happening in the
published.
sun.
Yeah, it was published in the New York Sun.
And the Apollo mission going to the moon.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating. I love this drawing detailing it.
Oh, from the yeah, this whole thing is like they were trying to convince people they were like Batman on the
Yeah,
moon.
which that's a whole side tangent on what is Batman.
I can't even get into it.
Should we be super pumped that all these kids are dressed up like Batman?
Yeah, well, and then we got how bats were related to COVID, right?
Yes, and you love bats, and bats love
No,
you.
no, no, no. Okay, so this slide, gosh, it's been so long since I've made these, right? So
This is beautiful.
it's crazy, right? So like, what do we have here? We have Jack and the Beanstalk, right? And another like imagery thing that I have like long contended is potentially connected to all this is Jacob's dream. What's it called? Jacob's ladder. Jacob's ladder,
Mhm.
right? Where he like falls asleep on a stone and he sees all these like angels like ascending and descending. And also like I've you know they even reference they call the astronauts ghosts, right? Like the fact that you can like see through them and stuff like that. To me, like the astronauts at times have looked like these angels that go up and down Jacob's
Mm.
ladder. And this is like this imagery is like propounded and promulgated to us, like ascending and they make a big deal, right? Like he says the iconic line, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, as he jumps off the ladder. Like this ladder, this white figure descending the ladder, saying the like this phrase is like burnt into our brains. And what's kind of interesting is that there are esoteric interpretations of the biblical story of Jacob's ladder in the Kabbalah, in Freemasonry. Like, and I've gotten some of the images here. It seems, how do I want to talk about it? It seems like this moon tree, this tree of life, this Jacob's ladder thing, they're all there is a core concept behind them all, and like the narratives are all
Mm,
collapsing in some way in this event. Like you've got a Jack and the Beanstalk narrative, you've got a Jacob's Ladder potential narrative, you've got the Tree of Life narrative, and what's really at the core of it is the conjunctio, is the hieroglyphs, the marriage of the solar and the lunar deities. That seems to
mhm.
be at its core, like the thing behind those narratives. So I just pointing this out. And I mean, even with Jack and the Beanstalk, it's Jack and Jacob's Ladder. Like these are essentially the same name, Jack and Jacob,
Yeah.
which gets into our whole conversation about why there's I do we say there are two or three? I think there were two Jack moonwalkers, and there's more
There's a
Jacks
lot of
involved in
Jacks.
Apollo. But the case, there might be more Allens there, or a number of
Yeah,
Allens. There's
yeah.
a lot of Jacks, a lot of Allens proportionally. So yeah, what struck you about this?
This is cool. I mean, this middle picture is really beautiful.
Which one?
The
The Blake
Mhm.
illustration of Jacob's Ladder?
Yes. Yes. I had never put together the footage of them descending on the moon on the I had never thought of that, but
Oh,
it's so obvious
that's
now.
me. That's 100% me in my schizo mind.
It's so obvious, and they're
Is it
white.
obvious? Do you think it's obvious?
Well,
Like it seems obvious to me, but like I don't. If I told that to somebody else, like they'd be like, you have lost your mind."
okay, well, we're talking about art is kind
Yeah,
of the we are stepping out of just a literal analysis here. If we can put that hat on, I hadn't put it together, so obviously it wasn't obvious, but I'm saying you pointed out, and I'm like, yeah, like there's these see-through, etheric looking
yeah,
white
yeah,
beings coming down the ladder onto the lunar
yeah,
surface.
yeah. Like kind of like angels.
And then they go back up, like they travel up and down the ladder, and the ladder kind of bridges them between the moon and the earth, like it gets them
Yeah.
into the vessel to travel between the realms. That's crazy. I'd never put that together.
Like even if it is an artifact of the time, right?
What's even crazier?
Like even it's not like some sort of secret message. It's just, yeah, it is kind of crazier.
I think
I'm really
either way.
trying to not. I'm trying not to scare people away from this and be like, look, you can just believe it's real, but there's some like supernatural element that's interfering here. Um, Perhaps I don't know if this would be helpful. I don't know. I need to like brush up on Jacob's Ladder, but let me just read
Yeah.
this real quick
Okay.
on his and see if we get if it generates any interesting. Because he seemed really animated by this, and maybe this
Mhm.
will lead to something productive. On his way to Haran from Beersheba, Jacob stops and sleeps for the night, using a stone for a pillow. He dreams of a ladder reaching to heaven. Angels ascend and descend on the ladder. In the dream, the Lord stands beside him and declares his promise to give this land to Jacob and his many offspring, blessing the earth's families through them. He further promises to be with Jacob wherever he goes. When Jacob wakes up, he is awestruck by the encounter with God. He takes the stone and sets it up as a pillar, calling the place Bethel. He vows that the Lord will be his God and that out of what God gives him, he will always give back 1/10. I mean, there's so much to unpack here. This is from Genesis chapter 28. But like it if there's I mean, the thing that jumps out to me is that it's about an encounter with God.
Mhm. Yeah.
And like, is that really what the moon landing was about? I and there's so much more to be said about the nature of that encounter.
Mhm. Before we got this deep, it seemed clear that all the moon stuff has alchemical elements to it. But I am not less fascinated or even less confused the more detail we get, the more we see like these stories that just overlay with it.
It's so hard to I hope I'm not just like throwing stuff at the wall. It's weird. Like this way of like analyzing things is like totally weird because it's like you're like solving it and there's like clues and like they're kind of flimsy until they're not. Like
Mhm.
all these different like interpretive schemes, like some of them are like based on an intuition or a hunch or like a name or a image, and then it starts to snowball.
Yep.
And then certain things they like have meters in my mind where like something is like that's a 15% chance of being a viable idea to like sometimes it'll just ratchet up to like 75%. And it's like,
Right.
how are you supposed to do like scholarship in this way?
It's an
Like
intuitive process. I mean,
it
you're
is.
you're talking, I mean, to me it's very much the introverted intuition function playing out. And then eventually it all comes together and you see a mosaic that then you can later sort of apply rational thinking to, but you can't really get there, I think, from just the pure linear logic lens. As these data points emerge and the bigger map emerges, then I think it's easier to. But I mean, I also pray when I want to know something. So you don't have to convince me.
Well, you know,
They
it's
show
like,
themselves. They show themselves. And how much of it too is like you're interacting with it, Luke. So it's like feeding it to you. Are you even influencing, with the observer effect? Are you
mm,
even influencing some of this because you're looking
no, we've you know, that's
beyond
a
confirmation bias?
yeah,
Bias. That's not what I'm
that's
talking about. That
yeah,
could be an element, but that's not what I'm saying.
yeah.
Saying is reality being rearranged.
I mean, we're we're perfectly okay with particles being affected by perception. So why couldn't it
Right.
add up and like
Right.
rearrange historical events? I mean, this is the thing. Like we're going to talk about Apollo 13. Apollo 13 it has like a major Mandela effect associated with it,
Yep.
right? Where it like flip flopped. Like in 2017, it everybody knew it as Houston, we have a problem. That it flipped to Houston, we've had a problem, and then like 2 months later, it flipped back to Houston, we have a problem. Like you can go out and like find like articles that were written and they go, oh no, like in like March of 2017 you had like all these internet magazines being like, oh yeah, it was always Houston, we have had a problem, you're just crazy and misremembering. And then it flipped back. So now all those articles that were written to debunk the Apollo 13 Mandela effect no longer appropriately address the reality. On this timeline, there is no Mandela effect associated with Apollo 13 because it switched back to what everybody realized that it was.
Mhm.
So now we have response articles to a Mandela effect that they will now have to claim never existed. So these people who wrote these articles will have to be like, oh, yeah, I guess I was high or something when I wrote that. Like,
This
what
is why
is
being
this?
sober is profoundly
Yeah.
helpful. Take that variable off the table.
Okay. All right.
Let's
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 let's,
go.
let's keep going.
We got another 2 hours.
How many more slides can I get through? We'll go kind of fast here. This is going to be
Okay.
kind of a lightning round, okay?
This is beautiful too. Is this from the Red
Yeah,
Book?
yeah. So Jung talks about the tree of life. We talked a little bit about this when I skipped ahead in one thing. Like he talks about the tree of life and not not thinking about there being a separation between good and evil. I have some lines highlighted here. This is from the Red Book, as Jordan said. To unlearn all distinctions, save the concerning direction is part of your salvation. Hence, you free yourself from the old curse of the knowledge of good and evil because you separated good from evil according to your best appraisal and aspired only to the good and denied the evil that you committed. Nevertheless, and failed to accept. Your roots no longer suckled the dark nourishment of the depths, and your tree became sick and withered. Therefore, the ancients said that after Adam had eaten the apple, the tree of paradise withered. Your life needs the dark. I can go on here, but essentially, this gets into the idea of the Ouroboros, the self fertilizing aspect of confronting the shadow in order to reach into the heavens and to experience growth and transcendence. And we looked, if you go to slide 350, I'm saying this kind of fast because we've been so backed up here, and Jordan's been nice to go through all this, but we looked at on slide 350, we looked at how the Ouroboros and the Tree of Life might fit together, specifically talking about these moon trees and the NASA meatball logo and how it might be connected to this. And this leads into the larger alchemical panels that are addressed in the Rosarium Philosophorum, which one day maybe we'll get into a deeper understanding of. But these moon trees, these Tree of Life, essential for understanding how the cosmic powers get back down to Earth. What cosmic powers were unleashed during the moon landing? I don't know. I don't even know how to begin to address that. Slide 351. This I was just looking up the Ouroboros stuff in that penguin symbol book that I like so much, and of course the serpent in the Edenic garden tree of knowledge of good and evil came to mind as well. This seems to be another replication of this idea, but it's also the essentially the idea is that there can be a negative aspect to the Ouroboros, the futility of everything kind of stuck in a plane of existence. I wanted to point that out as being one possible understanding of the Ouroboros versus the self-fertilization aspect that we've looked at. But up here in the top right-hand corner, I thought this was so interesting. There is there is this astronaut named Story. Okay, his name is Story. This is from like the 70s. This guy named Story Musgrave, Franklin Story Musgrave, claimed that he saw serpents in outer space. In, I guess, to the sighting show in 1995. He says, on two of my missions, and I still don't have an answer. I've seen a snake out there, 6, 7, 8 feet long. It is rubbery because it has internal waves in it, and it follows you for a rather long period of time. So, like, I'm just trying to this is an astronaut. This is like one of the angels, the heroes. Like, if I'm not interpreting this symbolically, like this is like buried that like an astronaut claimed on 2 separate occasions saw snakes in outer space. And then I'm like, okay, whatever, like story. That's cool story. I'm just kind of interested in symbolically and if it's connected to the Ouroboros in any way. But like, if you're really about all this outer space stuff, like, what do you do when you hear something like that? Do you just go, oh, this guy's like not telling the truth? Like, how do you pick and choose on this? Like, you're like, oh, no, like, we don't. Edgar Mitchell did some cool research on the moon, but then when he broke out those Zener cards and started doing ESP experiments and having religious experiences, we're not gonna, because Edgar Mitchell got like a lot of grief over that. Like, people made fun of him. Like, Edgar Mitchell is a brilliant man. Okay. You can say a lot of things about him. I have listened to his lectures. I've read a couple of his books. He's smarter than I am. And people made fun of him for talking about this stuff. And it's like, how I just don't know how like these details are being swept under the rug. And they're like all over the place in the Apollo missions and elsewhere in NASA.
They experienced something. I mean, this is crazy. The first thing that popped in my head was Donnie Darko, but I read the second paragraph below and it seems less like that. But he's just talking about these long, rubbery snakes that follow you for a rather long time.
Yeah.
It made me think of Donnie Darko. And
Yeah,
then you
like the
also
the
have
portals that come like the or I guess they're like kinda seeing their life path or something or whatever in Donnie
I
Darko.
think yeah, well, oof, there's a lot there to unpack. I don't necessarily wants to I think there's layers there.
Yeah.
Um, but it reminded me of that. And then I also thought of Dune, where we have
Oh,
the
yeah.
worms.
Yeah. Space worms.
Yes, they yeah, I guess they are space worms.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. I mean, they're not Ouroboros. The Ouroboros and the serpent are different things, but they're connected images. And I don't,
Well, and
I've gotta limit my range of focus to the Apollo missions, but this was too good to pass up when you're talking about astronauts seeing snakes in outer space. I was like, "Oh my god, like I have to mention this."
yeah. Well, and some traditions, like, they talk about like, how do I say this? Because I don't know that I'm saying it correctly, but the idea of the snake being like time, being like a
Yeah.
fundamental element of reality,
Yeah.
almost being the fabric itself of reality, but it could also be time. I don't know. I'm still
Yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot
trying
of
to
feeling.
comprehend all that.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot. All right. I'm just mentioning that in passing. I thought it was
It's
just
really cool.
news of the weird, and we're gonna close out here pretty soon. But let's go to Apollo 13. I've been wanting to talk
Yeah.
about this forever. Okay, there. It's. I don't think people know this. Like, I think maybe they know Apollo 13 had a problem. Houston, we have a problem, right? And they go, "Oh yeah, that's the one that like they they barely like survived or something, right?" I think most people would know that. But most people I don't think know that like this number 13 like haunts Apollo 13 beyond the name or beyond the number call sign or whatever. It it launched at 13 hours from Houston. It exploded or the service module exploded on April 13th. It splashed down at 1307 Kennedy Space Center. 13 nations offered rescue ships and aircraft. The astronauts' names, James, Fred, Jack. There we go. We got our Jack. You add them all up, you get 13 letters. The launch date, April 11th, 1970, when you sum it as it's written here, 41170, you get 13. It launched from pad 39, which is 3 times 13 is 39. And one of the guys who was supposed to go, Ken Mattingly, he got swapped out. Like this is like this omen, right? That this was going to be like a bad flight. Ken Mattingly got the German measles, which is composed of 13 letters. Now, some of these you could go, oh, okay, you're just looking for the number 13, right? And I don't know how you set this out. You go, okay, some of these are like legitimate, like creepy, uncanny instances of the number 13, and others of them are like, okay, so what? Right. I get that. Like, I get that. But I think the fact that it is Apollo 13, it launched at 1313, and it exploded on April 13th, and even the splash on 1307. Actually, the more I look at it, they're all pretty big and compelling. But those are, and here we have. Do you want to read these quotes from Young on the number 13? And I've got one
Sure.
from von Franz as well. Why don't you
Oh,
could you
excellent.
can you read all three of those?
Yeah. So from Young, a mathematician once remarked that everything in science was man made except numbers, which have had been created by God Himself. That's from Collected Works 8. Number and synchronicity were always brought into connection with one another. Both possess numinosity and mystery as their common characteristics. Number has invariably been used to characterize some numinous object, and all numbers from 1 to 9 are sacred, just as 10, 12, 13, 14, 28, 32, and 40 have a special significance. From Collected Works 18. And then from Marie von Franz, Creation Myths. When there is a sacred number, the next number is always a trespasser. With us, it is 13. 12 is completeness because 3 times 4 is particularly complete. 13 is a trespassing number. So it is either very lucky or very unlucky. It trespasses on the natural feeling of totality and grouping. Numbers, in their original meaning, always have a group quality.
And there's a lot more that could be said about this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I have more quotes on this, but
She writes a lot about
yeah.
numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like we've talked about this, like in terms of the apostles, there being 13 apostles, and the 13 the 13 here, breaks the perfection and the completeness of 12, which we've talked about extensively. The 12 moonwalkers, the 12 zodiac signs, et cetera, et cetera. And what
Mm-hmm.
I've begun doing, if you want to, you can just scroll through these. I have a tentative list. We don't need to go through all of these, but I have started to compile what each number might mean. And, again, verify. There's a lot more to be said here. You can just go through them. I don't really have anything else to say about them.
Oh, here we have 5.
Yeah,
This is what you were saying: wholeness, human form, the like the
yeah,
hands and the limbs
yeah.
and the head.
Like how we get to that, there's a lot more to be said. This is all very preliminary. Let's look at 8. 8 is a double
Mm.
quaternity individuation symbol, psychic wholeness integration. So that's relevant to that Gemini 8 thing that we looked at with the docking between Agena and Gemini 8.
Mhm.
Gemini.
Yeah, you're in the
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
You're an
Well,
insider.
how do you pronounce Mercury? Oh, we actually say Mercury, and we
It's
say
like it sounds like
Gemini,
America.
and we don't say Apollo, we say Apollo. That's how we
Uh-huh.
say it.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Just in group out group. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So now we're past the sacred numbers.
What makes a
Yeah.
sacred and what's a special one? I mean, there's a lot to still
Well,
do
and then
here.
what? 0 is kind of a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get to 10, we add the 0.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 13, it's got transformation and mystery by it. It's a great
Mm-hmm.
mystery. And that, again, if the transformation, the Aquarius, this is the one. I think was there lunar? I'll look it up, but the call signs for Apollo 13, I believe, were Odyssey and Aquarius.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, Apollo 13 call signs were Odyssey for the command service module and Aquarius for the lunar module. And they'll even say, like, oh yeah, like 2001 was like super popular at the time, so that's why we named it Odyssey. And I believe I think the reason why they named it Aquarius, because I believe that movie Hair, or that Broadway show Hair, was really popular. Isn't that where the Fifth Dimension song is from?
Yeah. Well, the
We
whole
are
age of
living
Aquarius.
in the age of
Yes.
Aquarius.
Yeah. When did that come out? Yeah. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, April 29th,
Yeah,
1968.
yeah,
So
yeah.
just a year prior.
So the Fifth Dimension Aquarius refers to the popular hit song Aquarius. It's also called "Let the Sun Shine In," a medley by the
Mm.
American. See, this is so deep. The fifth dimension, right? Like, what is the fifth dimension? Like, now I want to.
Well, oof. Them I've been going down the rabbit hole, and some stuff is hard to confirm, but a lot of the new age verbiage totally hijacked, of course, for propaganda purposes. A lot of it comes originally from Alice Bailey. I don't know if Fifth Dimension comes from her specifically, but a lot of like the Aquarian language, a lot of the stuff you see used in these things originally she wrote about.
Yeah. Google
And she
AI.
seems sincere.
Google AI, which is called Gemini.
Yeah.
Here it is again. Oh, geez. What would be a good name for an AI? Let's call it Gemini. Okay. In an esoteric context, the fifth dimension is not a physical location, but a higher state of consciousness characterized by unconditional love, unity, peace, and profound understanding of interconnectedness. It involves shifting perspective from a fear based dualistic worldview, 3D, to one of unity, detaching from ego, and living in alignment with a higher purpose. This heightened awareness is often described as an ascension to a state of being where the illusion of separation ceases to exist. Man, you could spiral about that.
Yeah. I mean, I use that language often because I think it's helpful. I don't know that I agree with everything in that definition, but that's certainly how I think it gets used
And I
quite
have to
a
put a
lot.
little asterisk there. Like, it's Google AI, maybe wrong.
Oh, yeah. But I think that is a fair summation of how many people are using it. I just wouldn't
Yeah.
say I resonate with that definition
Yeah.
in
All
its
right.
totality.
We're almost 3 hours. You ready to stop this?
Well, anything on 14, 28, 32, 40?
Oh, I didn't even look.
Is that our last number
Uh,
slide? Yeah. Moon
I
shadow.
mean,
Mm,
14, Apollo 14 is where they have the moon trees.
okay.
I mean, just this transition,
Yeah.
spiritual shift.
That's pretty vague.
40
Uh,
is really
well,
important in
and
terms.
14 collapses into 5. If we're
Yeah.
going down the numerology route,
Yeah,
14 is 5.
yeah,
But
I don't know about that.
okay.
As
Yeah.
far as the Apollo stuff, none of 28, 32, and 40 don't mean anything to me. But that's
I
not to
mean, the
say that they're
13 is enough.
yeah,
Holy smokes.
yeah. The
I didn't know
11,
all that. You
I
blew my mind.
yeah. I maybe I'll need to look up. It's kind of interesting that 11 is
Mm,
not
more
there.
prominent.
Yeah, it's not even on the list. I'll
Hmm.
make a note of that. I'll look it up next time.
Yeah, these are different than like the master numbers. I don't really see any of those on here,
Yeah.
but cool. Well, thanks,
Well,
Luke.
I'm so happy that we were able to get through so many slides because, like, honest to God, this just kept piling up. I mean, I got a lot more, but like this, yeah, I'm glad we got this done.
Me too. Me too.
All right.
More to dig into.
All right. See you next week.
Bye.